Chapter 1225. Blackstone City and the surrounding beaches were covered in a layer of darkness and decay. The air was filled with an unpleasant smell, and the city was lifeless, making people uneasy. Moreover, the defensive array of Blackstone City had been activated. A five-colored light barrier with a radius of 100 miles enveloped Blackrock City like a heavenly curtain. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned. Blackstone City is the main city of the 100 cities of the East Sea. Not only are there 100,000 elite soldiers stationed here, but Xiao Han is also there. How did it become like this? Did some disaster happen in the city? Why don't I see any civilians? Filled with doubts, he landed outside the city gate of Blackstone City. The huge city gate was tightly shut, and there was no one guarding the gate. The city guards were all standing on top of the Tenjiangtal city wall, looking down at him from above. Seeing him walk to the city gate, a pair of city guards on the wall immediately aimed their crossbows at him. The captain of the guards asked sternly, "Who are you?" Ji Tianqing took out the territorial lord's golden seal and said with dignity, "I am Ji Tianqing, the territorial lord of Tianqian. I am here to visit the divine general of Donglin. Please tell Lord Xiao." As soon as the city guards on the city wall saw the territorial lord's golden seal and sized him up, a burst of discussion immediately broke out. "It's Lord Ji Tianqing. It really is Lord Ji. I remember him. More than a year ago, he helped the divine general to suppress the sea demons of Gujade Bay. Wow, I've always heard that Lord Ji is the #1 genius of our clan, the most outstanding prince of the imperial residence. I didn't expect to see him in person today." Many of the city guards were overjoyed and excited. They looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of respect and admiration. Obviously, Ji Tianqing's reputation had spread across the continent. Even the people of the East Sea knew him. A year ago, he helped Xiao Han kill the sea demons that occupied Gujade Bay and became the hero of the East Sea. The people of the coastal cities sang his praises. Now that he had come to Blackstone City, how could the city guards not be excited? The city guards quickly opened the city gate and respectfully welcomed him into the city. The captain of the guards even personally led him into the city, rushing towards the Donglin Divine General's mansion. Along the way, Ji Tianqing observed the streets and alleys in the city. He found that there were indeed few people in the city, and all the doors and windows were tightly shut. The bustling streets and rows upon rows of shops were all closed, and there was no one in sight. Ji Tianqing was puzzled, so he asked the guard captain, "What happened in the city? Why are the commoners nowhere to be seen, and even the shops are closed?" The guard captain hurriedly replied respectfully, reporting to Lord Ji, "This subordinate also does not know what is going on." However, since half a month ago, the divine general had ordered the entire city to be under martial law. The citizens were not allowed to go out, and he had even activated the city defense array. This subordinate has heard rumors in the army that various generals and soldiers are rescuing the people in the coastal cities. It is said that there is a plague in the coastal cities. Plague? Ji Tianqing frowned as his heart skipped a beat. He immediately recalled that 2 days ago, the imperial tutor had told him that the demon emperor had created many blood gods to spread plagues and disasters on the frontier battlefield. Could it be that those blood gods are not only causing trouble on the frontier battlefield, but have also broken through the defensive line and infiltrated into the Eastern Sea? That is impossible. The three races are all defending the frontier with all their strength, resisting the invasion of the demon race. How could they have let the demon race infiltrate here? Ji Tianqing was very puzzled and uneasy. Not long after, the guard captain led him to the divine general's mansion. The guard captain turned and left. Ji Tianqing was welcomed into the divine general's mansion by the housekeeper, and he went to the guest hall to take a seat. He had only sat for a while, and had just drunk half a cup of tea, when the sound of footsteps came from the door of the hall. He turned his head to look at the door, and saw a tall and imposing figure quickly walking in. "Tianqing, I did not think that we would meet again so soon after we parted. What wind blew you here, and you actually took the initiative to visit the Divine General's mansion? The one who came was precisely Xiao Han, wearing a purple long robe with a dark red cloak draped over his shoulders, and his entire body emitted an iron-blooded domineering aura. He had just walked into the hall when he let out a hearty laugh and greeted Ji Tianqing. Behind him, there was even a delicate young girl wearing silver armor with a silver treasure sword hanging at her waist. It was precisely Xiao Ling-er. In the past, Xiao Ling-er looked very pretty and cute, and her temperament was also somewhat eccentric. But now, she wore silver armor and a blue cloak, and the appearance of wearing armor and carrying a sword appeared valiant and formidable, and her spirit was vigorous. Ji Tianqing nearly did not recognize her, and only saw her appearance clearly after staring blankly for a moment. And from the moment she stepped into the hall, she stared fixedly at Ji Tianqing. Her eyes flickered with joy, and her eyes were very bright. Very clearly, seeing Ji Tianqing again, her mood was very happy and excited, and she had many things in her heart that she wanted to pour out. Xiao Han walked in front of Ji Tianqing, cupped his hands, and bowed, then sat beside him and started chatting with him. Xiao Ling-er consciously stood behind Xiao Han, looking like an attendant. But this little attendant of hers was not considered competent. She did not have the dignified appearance of looking straight ahead. Instead, she kept staring at Ji Tianqing. Xiao Han drank tea as he asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, why did you come to Blackrock City? Could it be that you're going to the East Seas Water Race Imperial Court again?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained, "This time, I'm not going to the Water Race Imperial Court, but to the East Seas Return Ruins. The journey is long, and my companions are also seriously injured. I want to stay temporarily in Blackrock City for a few days and help them recuperate. Lord Divine General, I'm here to disturb you for a few days. It won't affect your official duties, right?" Xiao Han hurriedly waved his hand and said warmly, "Tianqing, what are you saying? I can't be happier that you can come as a guest. What's there to talk about delaying? Don't worry, I'll immediately get Ling-er to pass down the order to arrange the best residence for you and provide healing elixirs to help your companions heal." Hearing him mention Xiao Ling-er, Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at Xiao Ling-er and teased, "I haven't seen you for 2 months, but Miss Ling-er seems to have grown a lot. You look like a little general." Xiao Ling-er kept staring at him, waiting for a chance to talk to him. Now that she heard him praise her, she was overjoyed. She quickly smiled and said, "Big brother Tianqing, you flatter me. Ever since I left the Xiao clan, I followed Uncle Xiao Han. Oh no, followed Lord Divine General to Blackrock City. Now, I'm serving under Lord Divine General as the Deputy General of the East Forest Battleship. I usually lead the guards to protect the battleship and Lord Divine General." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded in satisfaction. He asked again, "What about Xiao Chen? Why don't I see him?" Xiao Han laughed softly and explained, "Xiao Chen is now the Flying Tiger General under me. He leads the 4th Fleet and is in charge of the situation in Xuanfeng City." Chapter 12:26. Xiao Han introduced Xiao Ling-er and Xiao Chen's situation. His face was full of smiles as he spoke, feeling satisfied and gratified. After Ji Tianqing heard that, he also nodded with a faint smile. That is good. Lord Xiao guiding them can be considered unearthing talents. The 2 of them are working for the people, proving their talents and repaying Lord Xiao's kindness. That's right. Xiao Han nodded in agreement and said, "At first, this Great One was worried that bringing them out of the Xiao clan and directly assigning positions to them would cause dissatisfaction among the soldiers under my command. After all, this Great One was also worried that people would slander me behind my back, saying that this Great One appointed people based on favoritism, placing relatives in the army. Fortunately, the 2 of them are very outstanding and did not disappoint. That was why the soldiers had nothing to say." After talking about Xiao Ling-er and Xiao Chen, Ji Tianqing withdrew his smile and asked Xiao Han, "Lord Xiao, when I came, I saw a terrible stench outside the city. Black qi drifted about. The citizens in the city were nowhere to be seen. All the doors and windows were tightly shut, and even the city protecting formation was activated. What exactly is going on? I heard that there seems to be a plague. Xiao Han was stunned for a moment. The smile on his face gradually faded, and he frowned deeply. Xiao Han's aura quickly changed from relaxed and joyful to heavy and solemn. Obviously, the happy smile just now was all an act. The frown on his face at this moment was the true portrayal of his mood. After a moment of silence, Xiao Han said in a solemn tone, "Jianxing, if you did not mention it, I did not want to tell you about this matter. It is because this matter is very troublesome and dangerous. You are just passing by and will be staying in Black Rock City for a few days. I do not want to trouble you and delay your companion's recuperation." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said, "Before I came to Black Rock City, I met the imperial tutor. He told me some information about the disaster and the plague. How troublesome and dangerous is this matter? If you are helpless, the people in the coastal cities will be the ones to suffer. Even if I have matters to attend to in the Eastern Sea's sinkhole and am only passing by Blackrock City, it's impossible for me to ignore this matter since I've encountered it." Hearing this, Xiao Han's eyes immediately lit up. He quickly asked, "Jianxing, you actually met the imperial tutor. Did the imperial tutor tell you the relevant information?" Xiao Ling'er's eyes lit up as well, and she revealed a gaze filled with shock and adoration. To her, the imperial tutor of the human race was an unreachable existence, like a celestial being. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing and the imperial tutor seemed to be very close. This undoubtedly meant that Ji Tianxing's status was extremely high, and his status was extremely revered. She stared fixedly at Ji Tianxing, her heart secretly excited. "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a solemn expression, "Lord Xiao, what exactly is going on? Please tell me in detail. Perhaps I can help." Xiao Han hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, "Tianxing, it's not that I don't care about the lives of the commoners. I just don't want to implicate you. Since you care about the commoners of the Eastern Sea and are willing to help, then I won't hide it from you. It's like this. On the morning of a month ago, the city lord of Spirit Flood City suddenly sent me an urgent report, saying that there was a disaster in a fishing town outside the city. A large amount of black-red fog surged out of nowhere and enveloped the entire fishing town. Within a short 2 hours, over 20,000 commoners in the town were all dead. Their corpses were corroded into bones and blood. Even the chickens, ducks, pigs, dogs, and other livestock in the town, as well as the marine fish stored by each family, were all turned into pools of blood and rotting bones. The entire fishing town was truly wiped out. At this point, Xiao Han's expression became even more solemn, and his tone became even lower. When the city lord of Spirit Flood City received the news, he sent people to the fishing town to check on the situation. However, the people he sent were all poisoned to death by the black-red fog and turned into blood and rotting bones like the commoners. Later, the sea breeze blew away the black-red fog, and the highly toxic fog spread out and eroded the 2 surrounding towns. The commoners and living creatures in the 2 towns were all killed and corroded by the poisonous fog. The poisonous fog continued to spread and even invaded Spirit Flood City and the bay, killing countless marine fish. The situation was uncontrollable, and the poisonous fog continued to spread, turning into a terrible plague that began to spread to the surrounding cities. All the commoners in the towns and cities that were infected by the highly toxic plague were killed by the plague. Spirit Flood City was the place where the plague broke out, and now it has become an empty city. More than half of the commoners were killed or injured, and the lucky survivors have all fled. The same thing happened to the commoners in the other cities. When they heard the news of the plague spreading, they were all scared out of their wits and fled with their families. Now, all the cities in the Eastern Sea are in dire straits. Corpses are everywhere, and the commoners are homeless. When Ji Tianqing heard this, his face became very unsightly. He asked in a low voice, "The highly toxic plague has spread to Blackstone City in just a month. Is that why you closed the city and activated the Great City Defense Array, so that the commoners can hide in their homes and are not allowed to go out?" Xiao Han nodded and said in a helpless and pained tone, "Yes, I really have no other choice. The coastal cities are in chaos, and the commoners are in a state of panic. Blackstone City is the main city of the Eastern Sea, and I am the overseer here. If the commoners of Blackstone City run away, then the billions of commoners in the Eastern Sea will no longer have any support and will collapse." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly to show that he understood. He asked in a low voice, "Have you calculated the losses and casualties caused by the highly toxic plague in the past month?" Xiao Han nodded. His tone was heavy as he said a number that made one's heart sink. "So far, the highly toxic plague has eroded 35 cities and killed more than 2 million commoners. It has forced more than 20 million commoners to flee their homes and become homeless. The 500,000 elite soldiers under my command have been comforting the commoners and helping them to move their camps to avoid the plague. In the past month, more than 40,000 soldiers have died. In addition, I have sent a large number of experts to investigate the origin of the plague and discuss a solution to the highly toxic plague. Unfortunately, until now, I have not found the origin of the plague, nor do I have a solution to the plague. I only know that the highly toxic plague should be related to the demon race. It seems to be some kind of evil secret art passed down from ancient times. After the commoners killed by the plague turn into blood and rotten bones, they will quickly condense into a blood cloud and disappear mysteriously. The weaker warriors and commoners would turn into a pool of blood within 2 hours after being infected by the plague. Only experts of Yuan Dan stage and above can hold on for 10 days. Experts of the heavenly origin stage can hold on for about a month before they die from the poison and turn into blood." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 12:27 Blood God Son. Xiao Han frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing in confusion. His eyes were filled with anticipation. "Tianqing, do you know the origin of the poisonous plague?" Ji Tianqing nodded. When he saw that there were no outsiders in the hall and only he and Xiao Ling were present, he explained, "It was the imperial preceptor who told me about the blood god's son. Back then, the demon king captured my wife, Yun Yao, and brought her to the northern desert. He used an ancient secret technique to turn her into a blood god's son, giving birth to a demonic soul in her body and turning her into a powerful evil demon. After that, I snuck into the heavenly demon palace in the northern desert and saved Yun Yao. Then, I asked a peerless expert to save Yun Yao. However, the demon king completely mastered the blood god's son's secret technique. In this year, he created at least dozens of blood god's sons. The blood god's sons had the power of the ancestor Fiend Celestial and could bring about the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations and plagues. Under the escort of many demon kings, they snuck into the battlefields at the borders of the 3 races. In the past few months, plagues and plagues kept breaking out on the battlefields at the borders. Just our race alone had more than 8 million casualties. The number of casualties among the demon race and the water race must be quite high too. I thought the blood god's sons would only cause trouble at the borders and wouldn't sneak into the hinterland of the continent. I didn't expect the blood god's sons to come to the Eastern Sea and spread the poisonous plague in the coastal cities." Xiao Han listened to Ji Tianqing attentively. His expression kept changing, and his eyes became more serious. He was even more worried. When Xiao Ling heard the words Ancestor Fiend Celestial and 3 calamities and 9 tribulations, she was confused. Her attention was all on Ji Tianqing's wife, Yun Yao. She imagined the scene of Yun Yao being captured by the demon king and Ji Tianqing sneaking into the demon's nest alone to save Yun Yao. Ji Tianqing's love for his wife made her feel extremely sacred and touched. She was even more envious of Yun Yao. She even thought that if Ji Tianqing was willing to treat her like this, she would be satisfied even if she died. She would be the happiest person in the world. At this moment, Xiao Han frowned and asked, "Ancestor Fiend Celestial. Isn't that the Grim Reaper in ancient myths and legends? When I was in the Xiao clan, it mentioned the Fiend Celestial and 9 tribulations, he was the incarnation of death. But the ancestral demon god had already fallen after the great battle of the gods, so how could he possibly appear now?" Ji Tianqing glanced at Xiao Ling and saw that she was in a daze, so he sent a voice transmission to Xiao Han. "Lord Xiao, this matter concerns the fate of the various clans in the continent, and it's an enormous secret. Now that tens of thousands of years had passed, the demonic emperor was doing everything he could to revive the ancestor demonic god and unify the entire Tianxian continent. The demon emperor wants to revive the Fiend Celestial." Xiao Han's expression changed drastically. His body shook violently, revealing a look of horror. As a divine general and a disciple of the Xiao clan, he had some understanding of ancient myths and legends. He knew how powerful the Fiend Celestial was. Because of this, when he heard that the Grim Reaper was about to be revived, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Ji Tianqing saw that he was in a daze from shock, so he tried to persuade him, "Lord Xiao, you don't have to be so worried. I've already asked the imperial preceptor to inform the emperor of this news. I believe the emperor will have a decision. The most important thing now is to find a way to solve the plague in the cities of East Sea and find the culprit, the blood god." Xiao Han came back to his senses and nodded quickly. "Yes, Tianqing, you are right. Even if the demon emperor wants to revive the Fiend Celestial, it is not something we can stop. The plague in the cities of East Sea is an imminent disaster. We have to solve it as soon as possible." After calming down, he said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, I have investigated the plague and found that it is related to the demon race. I suspect that there are demon race experts who have sneaked into the cities of East Sea, so I sent a large number of elite experts to investigate in secret. Indeed, I found hundreds of demon race experts who disguised themselves as humans. However, regarding the blood god Sun and the elite demon king that you mentioned, my subordinates have not been able to find any clues. Tianqing, do you have any suggestions or plans?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a heavy expression, "I have just arrived at Black Rock City today and have not figured out the situation. I also have not checked the cities that are affected by the plague. I don't have any plans or clues for the time being. How about this? Didn't you say that Xiao Chen is in charge of the situation in Xuanfeng City and rescuing the people? Since Xuanfeng City is affected by the plague, let's go there now and check the situation." Xiao Han quickly shook his head and persuaded, "Tianqing, you have traveled a long way to Black Rock City. You don't have to be in a hurry. Stay in the mansion and rest first. Aren't your companions heavily injured and in urgent need of treatment? Let's settle them down first." Ji Tianqing thought for a while and nodded, "That's good too. Lord Xiao, please arrange a place for us to stay first. I will go check on their injuries. After I deal with their injuries, I will go with you to Xuanfeng City." "All right, let's do that." Xiao Han agreed without hesitation. He personally led Ji Tianqing out of the main hall and rushed to a courtyard. This courtyard was in the depths of the divine general's estate. It was very safe and had a quiet and elegant environment. It was the most suitable place for secluded cultivation and healing without worrying about being disturbed. After Ji Tianqing settled down in the courtyard, he used his divine sense to enter the sword world to check on the situation in Peaceful Earth City. After a year of development, Peaceful Earth City had doubled in size and was even more majestic than before. Inside the city lord's estate, the Golden Mountain King was still sleeping on the ice jade bed in the secret room. In another secret room in the estate, Yun Yao was also circulating her energy to heal and recover her powers. She had helped Ji Tianqing block Ji Wuxia's sneak attack before, and her left shoulder and arm had almost been severed. Half of her body was a bloody mess. She was heavily injured. After a few days of circulating her energy, her wounds had already stabilized. Her wounds had all closed up, without leaving behind any scars or lingering problems. In another 5 or 6 days at most, she would be able to use the great power of the Neptunian god Pearl to quickly heal and return to her peak condition. Seeing that Yunyao was fine, Ji Tianqing stopped worrying. He flew into the Sword World and entered the Golden Mountain King's secret room. He helped heal the Golden Mountain King. The Golden Mountain King's wounds were just too heavy. His left arm and right leg had disappeared, and his neck had almost been severed. His body had basically been completely destroyed, and his soul was heavily injured as well. If he slowly healed, he would need at least 10 years. However, it was impossible for Ji Tianqing to let him waste so much time. He personally used the secret technique of the Wood Emperor's umbrella to heal the Golden Mountain King. 12 hours later, he had expended almost half of his powers and finally stabilized the Golden Mountain King's wounds. Chapter 12:28. The night passed quickly. By the next morning, the Jin Shan King's divine soul had stabilized. Next, he only needed to recuperate in the secret chamber, and he would be able to recover in about half a year. Ji Tianqing finished casting the spell and meditated for a while before leaving the Sword World. When he returned to his room, he saw that the sky outside the window was already bright and the sun was rising. Therefore, he left the room to look for Xiao Han. When he saw Xiao Han in the study room, Xiao Han was still busy going through official documents and handling the military affairs of the coastal cities. It was obvious that he had been busy all night without rest. After the two greeted each other, Xiao Han put down a pile of documents and memorials and left the study room with Ji Tianqing, ready to set off. Xiao Ling was already prepared and waiting at the entrance of the Divine General's estate. Although she had not rested for a few days and had been busy with official affairs. But today, she was able to work with Ji Tianqing to investigate the plague disaster. She was very excited and full of spirit. The three of them left the Divine General's estate together and quickly left Blackrock City for Xuanfeng City. On the way, Xiao Han briefed Ji Tianqing about the relevant situation and news. Xuanfeng City was 50,000 miles away from Blackrock City. It was also a coastal city with a history of more than 1,000 years. There were more than 500,000 people living in it. There was a bay near the city that was rich in fishing, pearls, and jade. There were 20,000 elite soldiers stationed near Xuanfeng City to protect the city and the bay. Since the plague spread to Xuanfeng City 3 days ago, Xiao Han sent Xiao Chen to take charge of the situation and lead the 20,000 elite soldiers to move the people in the city. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing could not help but ask, "Lord Xiao, the toxic plague is very powerful and will continue to spread. So far, more than 30 cities have been invaded by the toxic plague, and more than 20 million people have lost their homes. Where are the people being moved to? Did you send a large number of soldiers to protect them?" Xiao Han's eyes were a little dim as he said in a low voice, "I set up 4 temporary strongholds on the Tianchuan plain near the inland as the gathering place for the refugees. I sent 50,000 elite soldiers to protect the 4 refugee camps, and more than a dozen Sky Origin Realm experts to guard them. Currently, the highly toxic plague was only spreading to the coastal cities. It wouldn't spread to the Tianchuan plains for the time being. However, the incident happened so suddenly that most of the civilians fled in a panic. They were unable to wait for the elite soldiers to protect and evacuate them. More than 20 million people fled their homes, but most of them were stranded outside, fleeing in all directions. The total number of people who successfully moved to the Tianchuan plains and entered the 4 refugee camps is only about 5 million. Ji Tianqing frowned and said with a heavy heart, "If that's the case, there are at least 10 million people who are scattered in all directions. They can't be found or protected." "Yes." Xiao Han's expression turned grave as he said in a deep voice, "Cultivators with some strength have a high chance of escaping the Eastern Sea and returning to the mainland. However, The ordinary people without any martial strength would most likely die a violent death in the wilderness. The demon race is so cruel and vicious, using the blood god to create such a vicious plague. If it is not stopped and contained, the people of the Eastern Sea will be plunged into misery and suffering. 9 out of 10 houses will be destroyed. Ji Tianqing nodded and comforted him, Lord Shao, don't worry. The casualties and pain are all temporary. Since ancient times, evil has never triumphed over good. I believe that we will be able to solve the blood god and the plague soon and return peace to the people. What I am most worried about now is the 4 refugee camps in the Tianchuan plains. There are no cities or residences there, and they lack water, food, and all kinds of resources. How long could the suffering commoners hold on? If the blood god of the demon race sneaks into the refugee camps, won't we be wiped out? Xiao Han nodded and said, Tianqing, you are right. This is the biggest problem we are facing now, and it is also my sore point. However, it is difficult for me to solve the situation in a short period of time. I only hope that the people of the Eastern Sea are strong enough and can unite to overcome this difficulty. Ji Tianqing sighed and said with a bright light in his eyes, now, there are tens of thousands of people dying every day. The fastest way to solve the plague is to solve the root cause. As long as we find the blood god who spread the plague and eliminate him, everything will be easily solved. Xiao Han and Xiao Ling both expressed their agreement. 12 hours passed, and it was evening when Ji Tianqing and the other 2 arrived at Xuanfeng City. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the faint golden sunlight shone on the surface of the sea. However, on the endless coastline, the seawater was suffused with black gas, and the golden beach had also become dirty. The corpses and rotting bones of many fish were washed to the beach by the waves, emitting black gas and a foul smell. 20 miles away from the beach, there was an ancient city built with brown reefs. It was Xuanfeng City. The ancient city was squarish and covered an area of more than 70 miles. It emitted an ancient aura. The whistling sea breeze blew continuously, but it could not blow away the black gas and fog around Xuanfeng City. When Ji Tianqing and the other 2 arrived at Xuanfeng City, they saw piles of bones and corpses scattered on the grassland and plains outside the city. There were tens of thousands of corpses. There were young men and women, as well as old and weak women and children. They had all died a few days ago, and their deaths were strangely tragic. The flesh on the bones had all disappeared, leaving only a pool of dark red blood stains on the ground. It was obvious that it had long dried up. The sky was filled with strands of blood qi, which gathered into streaks of blood mist and flew towards the northwest. When Xiao Han and Xiao Ling saw such a shocking scene, they were so angry that their bodies trembled. They cursed the devil race for being heartless. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, observed in detail and suddenly made a discovery. He stretched out his hand to sense the sea breeze and frowned. Lord Shao, look at the blood mist in the sky. It's all flying towards the northwest. On the surface, the blood mist seems to have been blown away by the sea breeze, but the sea breeze is now in the southwest direction. Moreover, with the current speed of the sea breeze, it's obviously inconsistent with the speed of the blood mist flying away. Hearing this, Xiao Han immediately raised his eyebrows and said, Tianqing, back then, I used a day to think of this point and found this clue. I didn't expect you to find a clue as soon as you came to Xuanfeng City. You're really amazing. Xiao Han praised his intelligence and wisdom from the bottom of his heart. Then, he said in a deep voice, I know what you want to say. In fact, I've already investigated it. The blood mist is formed from the flesh and soul of the common people. It's obvious that it was attracted by some kind of force and gathered towards a place. Back then, I suspected that the devil race's powerhouses were secretly devouring the blood mist to strengthen their own devil power. Or maybe, the devil race's powerhouses set up a great formation somewhere to gather the blood mist in the sky to strengthen their power. However, when I followed the direction of the blood mist, I didn't find anything. The blood mist also changed direction. Chapter 12:29. Ji Tianqing originally thought that he would be able to find some clues from the sea breeze and the blood mist's direction. If he followed the blood mist's flight path, he would be able to find the demon powerhouse and the blood god's son. However, Xiao Han had already thought of this and had taken action to investigate. The little bit of hope that had just risen in his heart was immediately extinguished. Helpless, he could only temporarily dismiss this idea and follow Xiao Han to the city gate of Xuanfeng City. The closer they got to Xuanfeng City, the thicker the black gas in the sky outside the city. Xiao Han's expression became serious as he reminded her in a low voice, "Ling, you must be careful. Don't come into contact with this black gas. This is a highly toxic plague. The power of the highly toxic plague is very terrifying. Only soul refinement realm powerhouses can resist it and not be afraid of the plague's corrosion. Those below the soul refinement realm, even heaven origin realm powerhouses, will be corroded into white bones within a month." As he spoke, Xiao Han released the white light of his divine soul, forming a light shield to protect Xiao Ling. The three of them passed through layers of black gas and fog and finally arrived at the city gate. They saw that Xuanfeng City, which was shrouded in black gas and poisonous fog, had already activated the Great City Defense Array. A five-colored shield with a radius of dozens of miles enveloped the entire city. The powerful five-colored shield could block most of the black gas and poisonous fog. However, there were still traces of black gas floating in the sky inside the city, but the density of the poisonous fog was much lower than outside the city. Rows of armored Eastwood Army soldiers stood guard on top of the city walls, ready for battle. The 500,000 East Forest Army under Xiao Han's command were all elite troops, and they were also the guardians of the East Sea. Even if the highly toxic plague attacked and the black gas kept surging in the city, the East Forest Army was not afraid to retreat. Their bodies were as straight as javelins, standing on the city wall. Seeing the arrival of Ji Tianqing and the other two, an East Forest Army centurion pressed his hand on his sword and asked in a dignified voice, "Who are you?" Although this centurion was tall and strong, his strength was not bad, and he was full of energy when he spoke. His face was black. His left hand had already corroded and festered, revealing eerie white bones. The East Forest Army soldiers not far from him had also been corroded by the poisonous black gas. Their bodies were rotting, and black blood was seeping out of their faces. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but think to himself, Xiao Han is strict in his management of the army. The Donglin army is indeed an elite army. Although these soldiers are small fries, they are still admirable. Xiao Han took a step forward and said with a dignified expression, "I'm Xiao Han, and I'm here to inspect military affairs in Xuanfeng City." Hearing his dignified voice, the 30 or so Eastwood Army soldiers on the city wall immediately became solemn. They all knelt on one knee and saluted. "Greetings, Divine General." More than 30 people moved in unison. Their voices were full of energy and were very majestic. However, quite a few soldiers had been corroded by the strong poison. They were still able to stand. As soon as they knelt down, the flesh on their legs, heads, necks, and other parts of their bodies instantly collapsed. Black blood oozed out, revealing their white bones. This was especially true for the centurion. Half of the flesh on his face had festered and fallen off, revealing his white bones. Black blood flowed down, drenching half of his armor. Enduring such heart-wrenching pain, he actually didn't collapse. He only let out a painful groan. Xiao Linger's heart clenched as she watched, and her eyes turned red. However, she held back her tears and didn't cry out loud. This was because this was the dignity of the Donglin army. This was the iron bones of the Donglin army. Xiao Han took a deep breath and bowed deeply to the 30 or so Eastwood Army soldiers on the city wall. "Soldiers, you have worked hard. You are the pride of the Donglin army. You are the pride of me, Xiao Han. The 30 or so Eastwood Army soldiers saluted Xiao Han again. Their attitudes were respectful, and their eyes revealed fanaticism and worship. Half of the face of the centurion in the lead trembled. He said in a low and hoarse voice, "Divine General, compared to the people in the city who are suffering, we are not suffering." Xiao Han nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. It was the blessing of the people of the Eastern Sea that his soldiers could be so iron-blooded, lofty, and loyal. Soon, the Donglin army opened the city gate and welcomed Ji Tianqing and the other two into the city. As soon as they entered Xuanfeng City, the first thing they saw was a gloomy fog and a miserable scene of bloody rain. In the entire Xuanfeng City, the streets and alleys were filled with city guards and people running around in panic. The doors and windows of every household were tightly shut. Many houses were on fire, and black smoke rose into the sky. Squads after squads of armored city guards escorted 3 to 5 commoners in ragged clothes, hurriedly passing through the streets and alleys, running into the distance. On the wide black stone road, there were many corpses of people lying on the ground. Black blood flowed like a stream on the ground. The screams of men and women, old and young, painful roars, mournful howls, and heart-wrenching cries constantly came from all directions. Ji Tianqing's face was solemn as he walked forward. His eyes swept across the surroundings, and he immediately saw a tragic scene. A group of city guards supported and carried a few people who were emitting black smoke. They escaped from the houses and ran toward the city center. However, this group of people didn't run far before an old woman with gray hair collapsed on the spot. Her flesh fell off and fell to the ground. She screamed in pain and rolled on the ground. In just a few breaths, her flesh was completely corroded into black blood. She had turned into a small skeleton, curled up on the ground. Black blood flowed silently under her body, and wisps of blood energy flew into the sky. A few city guards paused for a moment, then quickly supported a few other people and continued to run toward the city center. However, before they could run a few steps, another child in the arms of a city guard let out a painful scream. It was a little girl of 6 or 7 years old. She was wearing a blue dress and had 2 pigtails. She was very cute. However, in just a few breaths, her flesh and blood quickly decayed and turned into a pool of black blood. Only a frail and petite skeleton was left. It was still covered in a tattered blue dress and was placed on the ground by the city guards. Not long after, one of the city guards also collapsed while running. The heavy armor and saber hit the black stone ground, producing a crisp sound. His flesh and blood festered. He screamed in pain and rolled on the ground. Soon, he stopped breathing. In a few breaths, a young warrior in his 20s turned into a pool of black blood, a pile of armor and saber, and a set of white bones. The other city guards and commoners were numb when they saw such a tragic scene. They were not afraid, nor did they cry. They only continued to run with wooden expressions. There was no other way. In these 2 days, similar scenes kept repeating, and everyone's emotions were almost numb. The people in the city were like walking corpses. They had almost lost the emotions of crying, sympathy, fear, and worry. Everyone was gloomy and hopeless, waiting helplessly for death to come. Chapter 12:30. When Ji Tianqing was at the Divine General's estate, he had heard the number of casualties reported by Xiao Han. 35 cities had been invaded by the plague. More than 2 million people had died, and more than 20 million people had lost their homes. These numbers sounded shocking and made one's heart heavy. However, without seeing the scene of the people being poisoned, numbers were just numbers. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was walking in Xuanfeng City. He saw with his own eyes the scene of people and soldiers rotting on the ground and eventually turning into blood and bones. Such a tragic scene was extremely shocking. It made one feel incomparable grief and indignation. A ball of anger was burning fiercely in one's heart. The closer the 3 of them got to the city center, the more people they saw running around in a panic. The corpses and blood on the ground were also denser. Ji Tianqing was not a powerless commoner, nor was he a weak soldier or martial artist. Seeing such a tragic scene, he would not feel despair and numbness like ordinary people. His expression became colder and colder, and his heart became heavier. His body surged with monstrous anger, and his whole body faintly emitted a soaring killing intent. His hatred and killing intent for the demon race rapidly increased to the limit. At this moment, he only wanted to find the demon race expert and the blood god as quickly as possible and kill them all. After a while, the three of them passed through the chaotic streets filled with corpses and entered the city lord's estate of Xuanfeng City. Inside and outside the city lord's estate, not only were there many Donglin soldiers guarding, there were also many city guards running back and forth. The soldiers rescued some old, weak, sick, disabled, or injured commoners from all over the city and hurriedly carried them into the city lord's estate. On the streets and open space outside the city lord's estate, there were many piles of bones and corpses. The streets and ground were dyed black by the blood. The sky above the city lord's estate was filled with dense black gas, emitting a heavy and solemn aura of death. Ji Tianqing knew with a glance that there must be a large number of commoners gathered in the city lord's estate. The facts proved that his guess was indeed correct. When the three of them walked into the city lord's estate, they saw that the estate was overcrowded. Commoners with terrified expressions were squeezed everywhere. There were also many injured or poisoned commoners who were lying on the ground with pained expressions as they continuously cried out and wailed. Xiao Ling inquired about Xiao Chen's location from the guard. When she found out that Xiao Chen was handling government affairs in the main hall, she hurriedly rushed over. However, when the three of them arrived at the main hall of the city lord's mansion, the entrance was already filled with suffering commoners. There were also countless soldiers entering and exiting, their expressions grave and anxious. Xiao Chen sat in the city lord's seat at the head of the hall. He was discussing something urgently with city lord Sun Feng and a few generals. From time to time, captains and commanders would rush to the main hall to report the situation to him or ask for instructions on the next step. Xiao Chen was swamped with work. He appeared fatigued, but he was even more anxious and worried. When he saw Xiao Han and Ji Tianqing arrive, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly stood up to greet them. This subordinate pays his respects to the divine general and young master Ji. City master Sun Feng, the captains, and the commanders hurriedly bowed. Xiao Han waved his hand, indicating that everyone need not be overly courteous. He walked to the main seat and sat down. He asked Xiao Chen, what's the current situation in Sun Feng City? Have all the commoners been transferred? Xiao Chen did not dare to waste time and did not waste any time. He directly answered, before the outbreak of the toxic plague, this subordinate had already ordered 4 generals and 12 commanders to successfully transfer 300,000 commoners. They should be arriving at the Tianchuan Plain soon. However, the toxic plague had infiltrated the Great City Barrier Formation and stopped the transfer plan. More than 300,000 commoners are trapped in the city. Now, close to 100,000 commoners have died inside and outside the city. There are only 240,000 people left. Only half of them were temporarily transferred to the underground secret rooms, passages, and the city lord's mansion. Everyone immediately understood. Xiao Han immediately frowned and asked in a deep voice, if that's the case, there are still 120,000 commoners that can't be relocated. Xiao Chen nodded and said in a serious tone, that's indeed the case. However, Divine General, please rest assured. This subordinate has already arranged for the soldiers to fully excavate the underground fortress and passages. At the latest, 20,000 soldiers will be able to excavate enough passages and secret rooms for the commoners to live in by tomorrow morning. However, Xiao Han shook his head and said with a grave expression, right now, the outbreak of the toxic plague is at its fiercest. I don't think those 120,000 commoners can last until tomorrow morning. Immediately bring this seat to the underground secret room. This seat will personally excavate the underground passage at the fastest speed possible." As he spoke, he was about to follow Xiao Chen into the underground passage. The toxic plague drifted in the air and spread through the air. However, in this 1 month, Xiao Han and the others found a way to temporarily avoid the toxic plague. That was to move the commoners deep underground. Of course, this was only a temporary stopgap measure. It would not last long. The toxic plague's corrosive power was very strong. The underground passages and secret rooms could only delay the spread of the plague. After understanding this point, Ji Tianqing suddenly opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "Lord Xiao, you don't have to worry about this matter. Leave it to me. Xiao Chen, give me the blueprints for the underground passage and the fortress. Then, withdraw those 20,000 soldiers and let them search and rescue the commoners." Hearing this, Xiao Han and Xiao Chen were both stunned. They looked at him in disbelief. "Tianqing, could it be that you have a way to quickly excavate the underground passage and shelter?" "Young Master Ji, this concerns the lives of 120,000 commoners. Are you sure you want to do this?" Ji Tianqing nodded his head with a solemn expression and said in a low voice, "Of course. Lord Xiao, I can complete the task within 4 hours and properly settle the 120,000 commoners." Seeing his solemn expression, his confident and resolute tone, Xiao Han chose to believe him. "Tianqing, ever since I met you, you have continuously created one miracle after another. Although you want to complete the task within 4 hours, no one would believe you. However, I believe that you will definitely create another miracle." After saying this, he ordered in a deep voice, "Xiao Chen, immediately follow young Master Ji's orders." Although Xiao Chen was somewhat hesitant, he did not dare to disobey Xiao Han's orders. He could only cup his hands and salute, indicating that he would obey. He gave the blueprints for the underground passage and shelter to Ji Tianqing. Then, he went to relay the order. Ji Tianqing took the blueprints and looked at them for a while. Then, he walked to the courtyard outside the main hall and entered the underground passage from the corner of the courtyard. Then, he opened the sword world and summoned the Gold Mountain King's son, Arrow. Arrow was the prince of the Earth Spirit race. His status was high, and his authority was second only to his father. Ji Tianqing gave the blueprints to Arrow and asked him to gather 800 Earth Spirit race warriors to excavate the underground passage and shelter as quickly as possible. After looking at the blueprints, Arrow immediately patted his chest and promised that he would complete the task very quickly. Chapter 1231. The city lord's mansion was still bustling with noise. Refugees were everywhere. There were civilians dying every second, turning into pools of blood in front of everyone's eyes, leaving only skeletons behind. Children's cries, men, women, old, and young screams of pain and anguish rang out in the city lord's mansion, causing everyone's heart to feel heavy. The 20,000 Eastwood Army soldiers who were digging underground quickly retreated from the city lord's mansion and went to search for civilians. The ground was quiet, as if nothing had happened. However, what everyone couldn't see was that there were hundreds of elf-like dwarves active in the rock layers and soil 1,000 meters below the city lord's mansion. They were all using their race's talent to control the power of metal and earth. They were digging tunnels at an unbelievable speed, building many tunnels and shelters. The underground of Sunfeng City, within a radius of 50 miles, was changing at an extremely fast speed. 2 hours passed quickly, and an underground castle gradually appeared in the depths of Sunfeng City. Although this underground castle was still very simple and crude, it was huge in scale and extended in all directions. It could accommodate hundreds of thousands of civilians for a short period of time. Half an hour later, the construction of the underground castle was completed. Ai Luo led the 800 warriors and reported to Ji Tianqing excitedly. Ji Tianqing knew that Ai Luo and the Earth Spirit race warriors had done their best. He was very gratified and grateful for this. He put Ai Luo and the warriors into the sword world and then passed on the good news to Xiao Han. Xiao Han, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Ling were gathered together to discuss countermeasures. They had anxious expressions on their faces. After Ji Tianqing arrived, the three of them stopped talking and looked at him in unison. "Tianqing, how's the progress of the project?" Xiao Han asked expectantly. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "The underground shelter has been completed. We can now move all the civilians there." "What? It's only been 3 hours, and it's already completed?" "Young Master Ji, are you sure it can accommodate 120,000 civilians?" Xiao Han, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Ling were all dumbfounded. They looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. Ji Tianqing did not explain anything. He pointed to the ground under his feet and said, "You will know when you see it." The three of them hurriedly released their spiritual senses and soul power and probed 1,000 meters into the ground to investigate the situation. They immediately saw that dense tunnels had appeared in the rock stratum deep below the ground at some point, extending in all directions and interweaving with each other. Hundreds of spacious and enormous caves were scattered deep underground and connected by numerous tunnels. Thousands of small caves had been dug into the walls of those caves, which could accommodate the temporary residence of the common people. This was a refuge for the common people to hide in. Each shelter could hold thousands of people. With hundreds of shelters added together, they could really hold 500,000 people. Seeing this scene, Xiao Han and the other two were once again dumbfounded, shocked to the point of being dumbstruck. "Oh my God! How was this an underground passage and shelter? This is simply an underground city. Unbelievable! Not to mention 120,000 commoners, even 500,000 commoners wouldn't be a problem. This is simply a miracle. Young Master Ji, how did you do it? This is simply like the power of a god." Seeing the exaggerated and shocked reactions of the three, Ji Tianqing did not explain anything. He waved his hand and said, "Don't waste time, quickly move the commoners to the underground city. The structure of the underground city is very tight, and the ventilation and drainage facilities are very safe. As long as it is protected by a formation, it will not be invaded by the plague for at least a month." Xiao Han once again revealed a shocked expression, and said with a joyful tone, "Tianqing. This is really great. In this way, the commoners can hide for at least a month." Xiao Chen immediately bowed to Ji Tianqing and said excitedly, "Young Master Ji, on behalf of the commoners of Xuanfeng City, I express my most sincere gratitude to you. You are their second parent." After bowing, he turned to leave and passed down the order to move the commoners. Xiao Ling looked at Ji Tianqing with bright eyes, revealing a deep shock and admiration. The closer she got to Ji Tianqing and the more she understood him, the more she felt that he was incomparably mysterious, unfathomable, and omnipotent. She even couldn't help but fantasize, how could there be such a perfect man in this world? Following that, Xiao Chen and the soldiers of Donglin army were busy moving the commoners. Xiao Han also found the ventilation and water outlets of the underground city and set up a few soul-grade formations to protect the air and water from the corrosion of the poisonous plague. Ji Tianqing let Xiao Ling stay in the city lord's mansion while he left alone. He flew around the city to check on the situation of the plague. He wanted to find some clues in the city to find a solution to the poisonous plague as soon as possible. After an hour, Ji Tianqing flew around Xuanfeng City and finally landed on the tower of the plaza in the city. He stood at the top of the tower, which was 100 zhang tall, and looked around expressionlessly. The sky was covered with dark clouds, and the poisonous black gas was getting denser and denser. The endless dark red blood gas also gathered into a blood mist that covered the sky and flew into the distance. Just now, he looked around the city and saw that 9 out of 10 houses were empty. Most of the commoners had fled Xuanfeng City or moved to the underground city. The streets and alleys, as well as the houses, were filled with skeletons. There were as many as 100,000 skeletons. It was a ghastly sight. Unfortunately, he didn't find any useful clues. He even released his divine sense to search the entire city. He checked the 200,000 refugees, but he didn't find the demon in disguise. At this moment, he stood alone on the top of the tower. After he calmed down, he silently thought and analyzed. 1,000 years ago, the demon emperor snuck into Zhongzhou and wantonly spread the demonic goo, causing the deaths of millions of commoners. The demonic goo killed millions of commoners, but it gathered an endless amount of flesh, blood, and souls for the demon emperor, causing his strength to increase explosively. Almost no one could defeat him. Now that the demonic goo can no longer harm the commoners of Zhongzhou, the demon emperor used the ancient evil technique, blood god, to harm the commoners of the three races again. The blood god carries the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations, which is 10 times more dangerous than the demonic goo. That's why it caused such a tragic situation today. The demon emperor must have his own scheme and purpose. It's very likely that he wants to use the flesh, blood, and souls of the commoners to increase his strength again. Although the poisonous plague can't hurt soul refinement realm cultivators and can only kill mortals below the soul refinement realm, how rare are soul refinement realm cultivators in this world? Even if every soul refinement realm cultivator tries their best to protect the commoners, they are too busy. The only way to solve this disaster is to eliminate the blood god. Unfortunately, the blood god is hiding in the dark. It's impossible to guard against them. It's very difficult to find them. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing looked at the dark red blood mist in the sky. His eyes flashed with a cold light. No matter how deep the blood god is hiding, the ultimate purpose of creating this disaster is to devour flesh, blood, and souls. Chapter 1232. Ji Tianqing pondered silently for a while, and he had an idea and plan in his mind. After the citizens were corroded by the poisonous plague, their flesh and blood turned into blood qi and flew away in the sky. Even a demon commander in the soul refinement realm couldn't control the blood qi from 100 miles away. From the looks of it, the blood god Sun and the demon race's powerhouses are very likely to be lurking around Sunfeng City. Or, they set up some kind of array formation around Sunfeng City. Xiao Han investigated according to this clue and didn't find the array formation or the blood god Sun, but it doesn't mean that I can't find it either. Thus, he quickly flew back to the city lord's mansion and found Xiao Han and Xiao Ling. The two of them were busy commanding the situation and letting the citizens enter the underground city. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had returned, Xiao Han hurriedly came up and asked, "Tianqing, did you find anything?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, "Lord Xiao, I have an idea that must be implemented as soon as possible. I need a secret room to sit in and cast the spell. I can't let anyone disturb me." Xiao Han immediately nodded and said, "No problem, I'll send someone to arrange it now." Soon, he found a secret room and rushed over with Ji Tianqing and Xiao Ling. Ji Tianqing entered the secret room. He and Xiao Ling guarded outside the door and waited patiently. In the dark secret room, there was nothing else except for a cold ice jade bed. Ji Tianqing didn't mind. He sat cross-legged on the cold ice jade bed and closed his eyes to start casting the spell. He formed hand seals with both hands, drawing complicated arcs and gestures as he muttered profound and obscure incantations. Swish! 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 His entire body flashed with divine soul white light, bursting with a powerful aura. After a moment, he shouted with a solemn expression, "Great Expansion 3000, Divine Soul Astral Projection." Swish! The divine soul sword that had been silent in his mind suddenly broke through the top of his head and flew into the air. The dark golden small sword quickly grew and became a 3-foot-long golden divine sword that flickered with sacred golden light. Since I cultivated the divine soul astral projection secret technique, this is the first time I'm using it. I hope it won't disappoint me. Ji Tianqing's voice came from the sword of divine spirit. He put his body into the sword world and placed the broken sword on the ice jade bed. Then, his divine soul sword flew out of the secret room and into the sky above the city lord's mansion. Xiao Han and Xiao Linger, who were guarding outside the secret room, instantly stared, their eyes wide open, and revealed bewildered expressions when they saw a golden light flash and a golden divine sword charge into the sky. The two of them looked up at the sky and discussed in low voices. "Uncle Xiao Han, did a divine sword fly up just now?" "That's right, it's a golden divine sword. It should be Tianqing casting a spell. What does Big Brother Tianqing want to do? There are no demons or blood gods in the city. Who is he going to kill? I'm not sure either. Let's just wait and see, and guard the secret room well." Just as the two of them were discussing, Ji Tianqing's golden sword soul had already whistled through the sky and flew out of Xuanfeng City. Swish! The 1-meter-long golden sword soul was like a golden stream of light, flying towards the northwest as fast as lightning. He flew 100 miles away and stopped in the sky for a moment. He released his divine soul power to cover a radius of 50 miles and carefully searched. Whether it was the gray sky, the ground covered with fine sand and bones, or the dark depths of the underground, he didn't let go of any of them. After 10 breaths, he searched a radius of 50 miles but didn't find anything. Therefore, his golden sword soul flew around Xuanfeng City and searched the surroundings of the city along the way. After about 15 minutes, Ji Tianqing thoroughly searched the area within 50 miles of Xuanfeng City. This wasn't just a 3-meter underground search, but a 1,000-meter underground search. Even a mosquito or a strand of hair couldn't escape his divine soul's detection. But even so, he still didn't find the aura of the demons, let alone any blood gods. His sword soul stopped in the air and pondered with a heart full of doubts. How can this be? I've searched a radius of 50 miles, but I didn't find anything. Could it be that the demon powerhouse can absorb blood qi from a few hundred miles away? That's impossible. Only a powerful formation can have such an effect. He was unwilling to give up and continued to fly towards the northwest. He wanted to see where the dark red blood qi that covered the sky was going to fly to. After 15 minutes, Ji Tianqing was 600 miles away from Xuanfeng City and entered a mountain range. He discovered that the dark red blood qi in the sky above this mountain range had become denser. Not only did the dark red blood mist that covered the sky come from Sunfeng City, but there were also a few blood mists that gathered from different directions. Obviously, the source of the blood qi must be from other cities and villages. This mountain range should be the intersection of the blood qi in the sky. It's very likely that the demons are hiding here. Ji Tianqing's spirit was shaken. He immediately flew into the mountain range and released his divine soul power to search carefully. His divine soul power covered a radius of 50 miles. Whether it was the sky or underground, he didn't even miss a rock or a blade of grass in the mountain range. He searched everything. It didn't take long for him to search the area within a radius of 200 miles. Finally, he found a clue in the depths of a 10,000 feet tall mountain. In the depths of the underground rock layer, there was a man-made cave that was only 100 feet in radius. Outside the cave, there was a heavenly origin grade grand formation that could conceal auras. Martial artists below the soul refinement realm would find it difficult to discover. And inside the cave, there was actually a small altar that was 10 meters tall. The altar was in the form of a pyramid that was commonly used by the demon race. It was built with the skulls of human martial artists and augmented with several heavenly origin grand formations. It had an evil demonic effect. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and discovered that the demonic qi on this altar had not dissipated. There was still a strong demonic power fluctuation remaining. It was just that there should be a demonic magic treasure at the top of the altar as the core of the altar. However, the top of the altar was completely empty. Ji Tianqing immediately concluded that the demon powerhouse must have left not long ago and took away the core magic treasure at the top of the altar. Damn demon bastards! They must have sensed me coming and hurriedly fled. My speed was already fast enough, but I couldn't catch them. No wonder Xiao Han couldn't find them. But those demon bastards definitely didn't go far. I should be able to catch up. When this thought flashed through his divine soul, his golden sword soul immediately left the cave and flew towards the northwest as fast as lightning. The sword soul's speed was extremely fast. It was like an aurora cutting through the sky. Even a 7th level soul refinement realm expert would find it hard to match. Whoosh! After a short while, the golden sword soul had flown 500 miles and arrived above a sparkling lake. At the same time, Ji Tianqing saw that above the lake, there was a thick black fog that was flying as fast as lightning. He used his divine soul power to investigate and immediately discovered that there were 3 heavenly origin realm demon kings hiding in the fog. Chapter 1233. Ji Tianqing's spirit shook when he finally found the traces of the demon clan's experts. His killing intent skyrocketed. Just like what the imperial tutor had told him, the powerful demons who escorted the blood god to spread the disaster were all elite demon kings. The 3 demon kings were all above the 6th level of the Sky Origin stage. They also had top Sky Origin stage demon Dao artifacts. Ji Tianqing's golden sword soul immediately descended from the sky. It turned into a 30-meter-long golden sword and slashed at the dark demon fog. Bastards of the demon race, die. His angry roar filled with murderous intent came from the giant sword. At that moment, the sacred golden light lit up the sky. The sharp sword Qi tore the world apart. In the dark demon fog, the 3 elite demon kings also saw the giant sword descending from the sky. They immediately became anxious. They desperately urged the demon fog to fly faster, trying to avoid the attack of the giant sword. However, they didn't expect the giant sword to be so powerful. Bang! With a deafening muffled sound, the huge golden sword shattered the pitch-black demonic fog. The demon fog that the 3 elite demon kings used to rest and travel collapsed on the spot. It turned into rolling black smoke and spread out. The terrifying impact sent the 3 demon kings flying. They fell from the sky in a sorry state and smashed into the lake below. 2 of the demon kings reacted first. They immediately rushed out of the water and ran away with wounds all over their bodies. The giant sword chased after them. It exploded with an unstoppable force. With a dazzling golden light, it hit one of the demon kings. Bang! With a muffled sound, the tall and burly elite demon king in black armor was killed by the giant sword. His 30-feet-tall body was shattered into pieces of flesh and blood that filled the air, sprinkling all over the lake. The other elite demon king didn't run far. The giant sword caught up with him and smashed him into pieces. Black demon blood and pieces of flesh mixed together and splashed in all directions. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 3 elite demon kings were killed. The last demon king was hiding at the bottom of the lake, not daring to show his face. This person was quite smart. He hurriedly burrowed into the ground and used the earth escape technique to escape underground. But it was futile. The golden sword suddenly shrunk to 3 feet long and chased into the ground in the blink of an eye. Swish swish. 2 dazzling golden lights flashed, and the golden sword soul cut off the demon king's legs like cutting vegetables. The demon king, who had lost his arms and legs, was like a human stick. Purple demon blood flowed out of his body as he let out heart-wrenching cries of pain. Ji Tianqing did not kill him. He struck his head with his sword and knocked him unconscious. Then, the golden sword soul emitted a golden light and enveloped the unconscious demon king. It then turned around and flew back to Xuanfeng City. About 15 minutes later, the golden sword soul flew back to Xuanfeng City and entered the secret chamber. Xiao Han and Xiao Linger were still guarding outside the secret room. The 2 of them were waiting in confusion when they suddenly saw the golden sword light flying back. They immediately revealed a surprised and puzzled expression. "Hey, young Master Ji's golden sword is flying back again." Xiao Linger pointed to the sky and said excitedly. Xiao Han frowned and muttered doubtfully, "I saw a figure wrapped in the sword light. It doesn't seem to be a human." "Ah. The sword light can fly back with a person?" Xiao Linger was stunned for a moment and said doubtfully, "If it's not a human, could it be a demon king?" Just as the two of them were puzzled, the door to the secret chamber opened. Ji Tianqing, who was dressed in a white robe, walked to the door and said with a calm expression, "Lord Xiao, come in and take a look. I've gained something." Xiao Han and Xiao Linger hurriedly followed him into the secret chamber and saw a demon king lying on the ground. This 3-meter-tall, burly demon was wearing black armor. His skin was dark purple and covered with thick, long hair. However, this person's arms and legs were chopped off, and he was unconscious. It was Xiao Linger's first time seeing a demon king. She curiously sized up the demon king, but her eyes were filled with hatred and disgust. Xiao Han revealed a surprised expression and hurriedly asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, what did you do just now? How did you catch a demon king so quickly?" Ji Tianqing explained what had happened to him. Xiao Han immediately frowned and said with a complicated tone, "Looks like our guess was right. The demon king created a highly toxic plague to devour the power of flesh and soul. However, what kind of formation did they set up to actually devour blood qi from 1,000 miles away? Also, Tianqing, your strength is so high. How could they discover you in advance?" Ji Tianqing said with a solemn tone, "This is also what I want to know, so I captured one alive. Lord Xiao, I'll leave the matter of extorting a confession to you. Take this demon king elsewhere to extort a confession. There's no need to be merciful to the demon king. You can use any means necessary as long as you can get some clues." Xiao Han hurriedly nodded and agreed, revealing an excited and expectant expression. He hated the demon king to the bone. Now that he could personally torture and interrogate a demon king, he was naturally eager to give it a try. "Oh right, Tianqing, aren't you going to extort a confession with me and wait for the results?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained, "I still have to continue casting spells to search the surroundings of Sun Feng City and see if I can find more demons." "That's good too." Xiao Han nodded in agreement and hurriedly carried the unconscious demon king out of the secret chamber. After he and Xiao Linger left, Ji Tianqing used the primordial spirit astral projection mystic technique to let the golden sword soul fly out of his body. He kept his physical body into the sword world, and the golden sword soul flew out of the secret chamber and left Sun Feng City as fast as a stream of light. In the next few hours, his sword soul flew in the sky, searching for the aura of the demon king and the whereabouts of the blood god Sun. In a full 6 hours, his sword soul searched the area within a radius of 10,000 miles. He saw that within 10,000 miles of Sun Feng City, hundreds of fishing villages and dozens of small towns had turned into dead wastelands. Countless people were corroded into white bones by the poisonous plague, and not even chickens or dogs were left in the villages. However, other than that, he did not find a single demon king, nor did he find any trace of the blood god Sun. When night fell, Ji Tianqing flew back to Sun Feng City somewhat disappointedly. His soul had returned to its original position. This was the first time he used the primordial spirit astral projection mystic technique. His sword soul flew for a few hours, and his soul power was greatly depleted. Therefore, he meditated in the secret chamber to adjust his breathing and recover his soul power. Unknowingly, a night had passed. By the morning of the second day, his soul power had recovered by more than half, and he ended his cultivation. As soon as he walked out of the secret chamber, he saw Xiao Han pacing outside the secret chamber, waiting anxiously. Seeing him come out, Xiao Han squeezed out a smile on his face and said excitedly, "Tianqing, you're finally out. I have 2 good news for you." Chapter 1234. Xiao Han was in a good mood and was a little excited. After all, ever since the outbreak of the poisonous plague, he had been helpless and at a loss on what to do about it. Now, with Ji Tianqing's help, there was finally progress, so of course he was happy. He couldn't wait to pull Ji Tianqing into the study and said, "Tianqing, I interrogated that demon king all night last night and finally got the result." Ji Tianqing nodded and said expectantly, "What's the result? Tell me." Xiao Han said in a low voice, "The blood god Sun does exist and is wreaking havoc in the coastal cities. According to that demon king, the blood god Sun they were escorting is called Yin Qi. 3 months ago, a total of 9 elite demon kings protected Yin Qi, crossed the border defense line and sneaked into the East Sea. The mission of those 9 demon kings was to help Yin Qi create disasters and poison our human race's people. The flesh, blood, and spirit of the dead commoners despise them greatly, so they carry a type of demonic Tao artifact to collect blood and qi. Speaking of this, Xiao Han took out a dark purple gourd and handed it to Ji Tianqing. They used this magic weapon to place it in the altar formation to collect the blood between heaven and earth and use it to feed the blood god Sun. Ji Tianqing took the dark purple gourd and looked at it carefully, then frowned and said, "Isn't this the purple Yin magic gourd?" Xiao Han raised his eyebrows and asked, "Tianqing, you recognize this gourd?" "Of course I recognize it." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a cold face, "Back in the central state, the demon race disguised as humans and infiltrated the cities of the central state, wantonly spreading the demon king's demon goo. They used this purple-ine magic gourd to collect flesh and souls and store the demon goo and poisonous insects. When I investigated the demon goo chaos, I saw it several times and even seized a few." "I see." Xiao Han nodded and suddenly understood. Ji Tianqing asked again, "Lord Xiao, did you find any other clues? What about the other 6 elite demon kings and the blood god Sun? Are they working together? Where are they hiding now?" Xiao Han revealed a regretful expression as he shook his head and said, "I've forced him to answer this question many times and tortured him for most of the night. Unfortunately, he still refused to say a word. I could see that he had a soul-deep respect and loyalty for the blood god. I didn't know why. After that, he was tortured to the point that it was unbearable to look at. Unable to bear it any longer, he swallowed poison and killed himself when I wasn't paying attention." Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at him suspiciously. He asked, "Lord Xiao, you are a soul-refining realm expert. A mere demon king actually committed suicide in front of you? Logically speaking, if a Sky Origin stage demon king were to fall into the hands of an expert like Xiao Han, he would definitely beg for death." Xiao Han immediately felt a little embarrassed. He smiled embarrassedly and explained, "Tianqing, you don't know. Those demon kings are the elite death warriors of the demon race. Even if I sealed his power and made him unable to move, there is still poison in his body. As a last resort, he made the poison in his body explode with a thought and died on the spot." After Ji Tianqing heard this, he could only sigh helplessly and nodded. The demon race is cunning and cruel. They are vicious to the people of various races and are even more vicious to themselves. Forget it, that demon king is dead. It's a pity that we only got this little clue. It's not very useful." Hearing him say this, Xiao Han's agitated emotions immediately calmed down. He frowned slightly. After weighing the pros and cons for a moment, he said, "Tianqing, apart from this matter, there's also good news. All the people of Xuanfeng City have successfully moved into the underground castle. I've also set up a defensive formation for the underground castle. Judging from the current situation, the people of Xuanfeng City will be safe for at least a month. After a month, the poisonous plague that enveloped Xuanfeng City will have long dissipated. What do you plan to do next?" Ji Tianqing said without hesitation, "The problem of Xuanfeng City has been temporarily solved. The remaining matters will be left to City Lord Xuanfeng. There are also a few other cities that are suffering from a disaster. We need to hurry over and help them. Furthermore, we need to find the Blood God and the 6 demon kings as soon as possible. As long as we eliminate them, the disaster of the Eastern Sea will be easily resolved. Xiao Han nodded in agreement without hesitation. All right, then we'll do as you say. I'll immediately arrange the itinerary. After he finished speaking, he turned and left the study to give orders to City Lord Xuanfeng. Ji Tianqing waited in the study for 15 minutes before Xiao Han finished giving instructions. Then, he brought Xiao Ling to look for him. The 3 of them left Xuanfeng City together and flew towards the northwest direction. While they were flying, Xiao Han explained the situation to Ji Tianqing. He said, Tianqing, we're going to Yongyang City next. That city is only 15,000 kilometers away from here. Just yesterday morning, a poisonous black qi that covered the sky appeared in a few small towns outside the city. This morning, I received news that 7 of the 9 towns under Yongyang City's jurisdiction have been invaded by the poisonous plague. The commoners have all died. The poisonous plague is currently spreading to Yongyang City. It seems that the poisonous plague has also appeared in the city. Hearing Xiao Han's words, Ji Tianqing's eyes immediately revealed a cold glint. He said in an icy tone, it seems that the demon kings and the blood god scions are near Yongyang City. The fact that the poisonous plague just broke out means that they are secretly spreading the poison. If we hurry over, we might be able to catch them red-handed. That's right. Xiao Han nodded in agreement. He said with a murderous aura, those damned blood god scions and demon kings are actually so arrogant. They are causing trouble in Yongyang City, which is not far from us. This time, I will definitely not let them escape. I will definitely catch them all in one fell swoop. The 3 of them were filled with anticipation and killing intent as they flew across the sky at lightning speed, rushing towards Yongyang City. About 8 hours later, the 3 of them arrived at Yongyang City. When they were still 100 miles away, Ji Tianqing saw that the small city standing on the plains had already activated the Great City Defense Array. In the sky outside the city, there were strands of black qi surging and countless dark red qi of blood dancing in the air. Xiao Han released the white light of his divine spirit to protect Xiao Ling. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing released the power of his divine spirit to secretly investigate the situation in Yongyang City. He saw that Yongyang City was protected by a 5-colored light barrier with a radius of dozens of miles. The 3 city gates were all tightly shut. There were city guards on the city walls. The doors and windows of every household in the city were tightly shut. There were no pedestrians on the streets. There were only squads of soldiers shuttling back and forth in the city. Dense black qi constantly emitted from a few residences in the city and spread throughout the city. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's eyes revealed a cold glint as his killing intent surged. Chapter 1235. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 didn't waste any time and rushed to the city gate as fast as they could. Then, Xiao Han flashed his identity token and asked the city guards to open the city gate. After the 3 of them crossed the city gate and entered Yongyang City, they started to act under Ji Tianqing's arrangement. The houses and buildings emitting the toxic black gas were located in 3 different areas of Yongyang City. They were dozens of miles apart from each other. The 3 of them split up and rushed to each location to search for the houses and buildings. In a short 10 breaths of time, Xiao Han flew over 10 miles with lightning speed and entered a simple and elegant house. He found a middle-aged demon disguised as a middle-aged man in the house's underground secret room. The middle-aged man hid deep underground with 6 purpline demonic gourds in front of him. He was casting a spell to activate the toxic black gas in the gourds. After Xiao Han arrived, he caught the man red-handed and seized the 6 purpline demonic gourds. After he beat the middle-aged man half to death, the man revealed his true form. He was actually a middle-aged demon with the strength of Sky Origin Stage 8. Without a doubt, he was one of the 6 elite demon kings. After Xiao Han captured him, he took the 6 demonic gourds filled with toxic black gas and rushed to the city to meet up with Ji Tianqing. At the same time, Xiao Ling rushed to an ancient tower. She found 5 purple-yin demonic gourds in the tower's underground secret passage. They were arranged in a special pattern and formed a subtle array. She relied on the soul power shield that Xiao Han gave her and wasn't afraid of the black gas corrosion. She seized the 5 purple-yin demonic gourds. At this time, a few muffled sounds came from a manor in the east of the city. A dazzling golden light lit up. It was Ji Tianqing fighting with 2 elite demon kings. When he arrived at the manor, the 2 demon kings disguised as the manor's servants were hiding in the dark and releasing toxic black gas. After Ji Tianqing found them, he killed one of them and captured the other. He seized more than 10 purple-yin demonic gourds. After 100 breaths of time, the 3 of them arrived at the city's plaza and gathered. Xiao Han reported to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, I caught a demon king in 6 demon gourds." Xiao Ling was also filled with excitement as she said, "Big brother Tianqing, I also found 5 demonic gourds." Ji Tianqing nodded and threw the demon king in his hand to the ground. He said in a low voice, "I also found a dozen purple-yin magic gourds. I killed a demon king and captured another. Looks like we came at the right time. Those 3 bastards were releasing a highly toxic plague. Luckily, we stopped them in time." Xiao Han also threw the demon king he had caught onto the ground and said with a grave expression, "Fortunately, the poisonous plague has just broken out. If we had come any later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Tianqing, how should we deal with these 2 demon kings? Shall I interrogate them?" "No need, I'll do it myself." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and stared at the 2 demon kings expressionlessly. His entire body released an invisible divine soul pressure. The 2 demon kings were beaten half to death. Their bodies were dripping with blood, and they were missing arms and legs. One of the demon kings was a middle-aged man, and the other was a white-haired old man of the demon race. Both of them had their cultivation sealed. They could neither escape nor move. They were like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. When they were enveloped by Ji Tianqing's divine soul pressure, they felt a stinging pain all over their bodies. Deep fear surged in their hearts, and they couldn't help but lower their heads. Ji Tianqing's right hand flashed with a golden light. He condensed a golden sword with his magic power and pointed it at the middle-aged demon king's chest. He shouted, "From now on, you will answer every question I ask." The middle-aged demon king looked up at him and sneered, "Ha ha ha. Stupid." Although he was speaking in the demon race's language, Ji Tianqing could understand him. He immediately waved the golden sword in his hand and cut off one of his arms. An entire arm covered in blood fell to the ground with a plop. A stream of black blood spurted out from the wound of the severed arm and sprinkled on the ground. The middle-aged demon king's face twitched in pain, and he let out a hoarse scream. Ji Tianqing remained expressionless. He said coldly, "Speak human language. Where is the blood god?" The middle-aged demon king was still furious. His eyes were dark red and flashed with a murderous aura. He glared at Ji Tianqing and sneered, "Boy, even if you kill me, I will never tell you. The blood god will assist the demon king to kill all the races in the world and unify the entire continent. Sooner or later, you lowly human beings will all die." Before he could finish, Ji Tianqing wielded the golden sword in his hand and chopped off both of his legs with a series of swooshing sounds. Suddenly, black demon blood spilled all over the ground and gathered into a small stream flowing on the ground. The middle-aged demon king's body twitched in pain, but he couldn't resist at all. He could only let out a miserable scream. However, after a few screams, black blood flowed out of his eyes. He shouted hoarsely, "Human reptile. Even if you kill me, so what? In order to protect the blood god, I will sacrifice myself for the demon king. I will die honorably. Just wait and see." In a few days, all the humans in the East Sea will be dead. Ha ha ha. The middle-aged demon king laughed wildly. After a few laughs, his voice stopped abruptly, and he died on the spot. Ji Tianqing hurried to check and found that the poison in the demon king's soul had directly poisoned him to death. What a ruthless method, to actually plant poison in the soul. Ji Tianqing frowned and murmured with a gloomy face. The elder of the demon clan sneered, ha ha ha. Little bastard, how could you understand the pride and honor of our demon clan? For the demon king's great cause of unifying the continent, we can sacrifice anyone. Just kill me. Give me a quick death. Soon, the blood god's son will be able to kill all of you. When that time comes, you lowly human reptiles will die in batches. There will be tens of millions of humans left in the East Sea. Rivers of blood will flow and mountains of corpses will be formed. After a sneer, the old demon king's voice became weaker and weaker. Black blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth, and his eyes gradually closed. Obviously, he had also detonated the poison in his soul and committed suicide on the spot. Damn it! Ji Tianqing was livid with anger, but there was nothing he could do. Xiao Han was also full of anger. He clenched his fists tightly, and his whole body was surging with murderous intent. However, he quickly calmed down and asked Ji Tianqing, Tianqing, these demon kings are too difficult to deal with. When they sneaked into our territory to carry out the mission, they had already made up their minds to die. It seems that it is too difficult for us to use them as a breakthrough to investigate the blood god's whereabouts. I don't think so. Ji Tianqing shook his head and sneered, although these two demon kings did not reveal the blood god's whereabouts, they have inadvertently revealed the key information. Chapter 1236. Tianqing, what do you mean? Xiao Han furrowed his brows and asked Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing explained calmly, when we arrived just now, the three demon kings were using the purpleine magic gourd to release a poisonous plague. What does this mean? Not only can the blood god release the 3 disasters and 9 disasters, but the demon kings can also use the purpleine magic gourd to store the poisonous plague and spread it everywhere. Just now, the old demon king said that the blood god is about to achieve great success. This makes me suspect that the blood god can also cultivate and become stronger. The opportunity for the blood god to become stronger must be the flesh and soul of the people, which is the blood qi collected by the demon kings. Hearing this, Xiao Han and Xiao Ling nodded in agreement. I see. Tianqing, your analysis is very reasonable. Brother Tianqing, I didn't expect you to be able to analyze so many clues from the words of the 2 demon kings. Ji Tianqing said with a serious face, other than that, there is also a very important piece of information that cannot be ignored. Just now, the old demon king said that our people will soon die in batches until the people of the Eastern Sea are all dead. I suspect that the blood god is moving separately from them because he is carrying out a major plan to greatly increase his strength. Once the blood god succeeds in increasing his strength, an even greater disaster will come. Therefore, I can roughly guess the next target of the blood god. Xiao Han immediately became nervous and asked, which city is it? Is it the Black Rock City? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said in a low and serious voice, it's the Tianquan Plain. Ah! Xiao Ling was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she thought of something and her face turned pale. Xiao Han's face also changed drastically. He said with a sudden realization, I understand. I set up 4 refugee camps on the Tianquan Plain and gathered 5 to 6 million people. Once the blood god spreads the plague in the refugee camps, he will definitely be able to kill millions of people and obtain a terrifying amount of flesh and blood qi. His strength will definitely increase exponentially. No, we have to rush to the Tianquan Plain immediately. We can't let the blood god's scheme succeed. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a grave expression, Lord Xiao, there is no need to be anxious. This is just my guess and might not be accurate. Send an order to the Tianchuan Plains and have the garrison generals strengthen their defenses. Then, we will rush over. This matter is dangerous, and it is inconvenient for Miss Ling, to follow. The two of us will be enough to deal with it. When Xiao Ling heard this, she immediately frowned and said with some grievance, Big Brother Tianqing, I'm also a member of the Donglin army now. Protecting the citizens is also my duty. Xiao Han weighed the pros and cons and said, Ling, hurry back to the Black Rock City and stay in the Divine General's estate. Wait for my orders. What happened to your neck? Halfway through, his tone suddenly changed, and his voice was filled with worry and anxiety. Ji Tianqing subconsciously turned his head to look at Xiao Ling and saw a faint black aura at the base of her white neck. Previously, her long hair had covered her neck, so the two of them had not noticed this. After seeing her neck clearly, Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han's expressions changed on the spot. This is bad. Ling has been corroded by the highly toxic plague. Xiao Han frowned, and his expression was as gloomy as ice. Ji Tianqing also frowned and asked with a worried tone, Lord Xiao, weren't you using a soul power shield to protect her? When was she corroded by the highly toxic plague? Xiao Han thought for a moment and suddenly understood. I know, Ling, must have gone to check the situation in the tower just now and came into contact with the purpline demonic gourd and the highly toxic plague. Xiao Ling was also a little flustered. She was terrified and her face was pale. However, she did not cry. She forced herself to calm down and quickly comforted the two of them. Uncle Xiao Han, Big Brother Tianqing, don't worry. I don't feel any discomfort. Uncle Xiao Han also said before that even if a heavenly origin realm martial artist is corroded by the highly toxic plague, they can still hold on for a month. Speaking up to here, she looked at Ji Tianqing and squeezed out a smile. Her tone was full of hope. Big Brother Tianqing, I have already been infected by the highly toxic plague and can only live for a month. Big Brother Tianqing, let me go with you to the Tianchuan Plains, okay? Before Ji Tianqing could answer, Xiao Han shouted in a dignified tone, Ling, don't mess around. This matter concerns your life. How can you be so willful? You are only at the initial stage of being corroded by the highly toxic plague. There is still a chance to save you. I will help you expel the poison. Xiao Ling shook her head and said with a firm tone, Uncle Xiao Han, although you are a soul refinement expert and can resist the highly toxic plague, there might be an accident. You are the East Woods Divine General. If you are injured because of this, wouldn't I be a sinner? Moreover, the Blood God is about to attack the Tianchuan Plains. Saving the civilians is more important. Don't worry about me. Go save the civilians. Xiao Ling Xiao Han was anxious and worried. He shouted, This is an order. You cannot disobey. Xiao Ling immediately lowered her head and didn't dare to refute. Ji Tianqing said with a calm expression, Lord Xiao, let me handle this matter. It shouldn't take too much time. It will be resolved soon. Xiao Han and Xiao Ling were stunned for a moment. They looked at him in disbelief. Tianqing, are you really confident? Big Brother Tianqing, aren't you afraid of being corroded by the highly toxic poison? Ji Tianqing didn't explain anything. He walked straight to Xiao Ling and stood a step away from her. Then, he reached out his right hand with a calm expression. He pressed on Xiao Ling's neck and gently stroked it. The distance between the two was too close. When their eyes met, they could hear each other's heartbeat and breathing. This distance had already exceeded the range of ordinary friends. Only family, husband and wife, and lovers could do this. Xiao Ling's delicate body suddenly stiffened. She was stunned and didn't dare to move. Her eyes gazed at Ji Tianqing affectionately. Her lips moved slightly, but she couldn't say a word. Especially when Ji Tianqing's broad and warm palm gently stroked her neck. She was so shy that her cheeks were flushed red. Her body trembled slightly, and her heart was about to melt. But Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent. He didn't have any distracting thoughts in his heart. He focused on activating the power of the heaven-mending orb and releasing a dense sacred white light from his palm. The gentle sacred white light wrapped around Xiao Ling-er's neck and gradually spread to her right shoulder, right arm, and right palm. At this time, Ji Tianqing discovered that not only was there a black aura around her neck, a thin black line had appeared on her shoulder, arm, and the back of her hand. However, the mysterious white light released by the heaven-mending orb quickly swallowed the black aura in her body and eliminated the black line on her arm. After about 100 breaths of time, the highly toxic black aura that invaded Xiao Ling-er's body was completely purified by the heaven-mending orb. Ji Tianqing slowly withdrew his palm and nodded, "All right, Miss Ling-er is fine now." Chapter 1237. Xiao Ling-er remained silent for a long while before she calmed down. That short 100 breaths of time was the closest she had ever been to Ji Tianqing. It was also her most beautiful memory. Especially when Ji Tianqing helped her get rid of the poisonous black gas and saved her life. He did not take such a huge favor to heart, as if he had done something insignificant. Such chivalry made Xiao Ling-er extremely grateful and engraved it in her mind forever. When she came back to her senses, Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han had already left and were flying towards the Tianchuan plains at lightning speed. She looked at their departing figures with a blissful smile and muttered, "Big brother Tianqing, I believe you will definitely quell the plague and benefit the people of the Eastern Sea. I hope you will be careful and not get hurt. I will return to Blackrock City now and wait for your and Uncle Xiao Han's triumphant return." After she finished speaking, she also turned and rushed out of the city. Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han hurried through the sky, their speed as fast as light. The Tianchuan Plains was hundreds of thousands of miles away from Yongyang City. If they were to bring Xiao Ling-er along, it would take at least an entire day. However, with their traveling speed, 18 hours was more than enough. Not long after they left Yongyang City, Ji Tianqing took out the broken sword, the burial of heaven, and handed it to Xiao Han. He instructed, "Lord Xiao, I will be entering this sword later. I need half a day to look up information on the blood god Sun. Take this sword and rush to the Tianchuan Plains." Xiao Han was stunned for a moment before he received the sword with a solemn expression. He nodded and said, "Tianqing, don't worry. I will not disappoint you." Ji Tianqing did not say anything else. He flew into the broken sword and entered the sword's world. Xiao Han kept the broken sword and continued to rush towards the Tianchuan Plains. Ji Tianqing found a secret room in peaceful Earth City. His divine soul entered the Kenshin tomb and arrived before the 18 mysterious tombstones. When his palms touched the first tombstone on the right, his soul was sucked into the heavenly book pavilion by the tombstone. This was his third time entering the heavenly sutra pavilion. He passed through the sea of clouds with ease, crossed the white jade bridge, and entered the heavenly sutra pavilion. He shuttled through the many bookshelves, searching for books about ancient myths and demons. He believed that the heavenly book pavilion must have collected books related to the demon race, and it was very likely that there were records about the blood god. After all, the blood god Sion was a secret technique of the ancient demons. At the moment, he didn't know enough about the blood god. He didn't know how to find the blood god or how to restrain it. If he could understand the characteristics and methods of dealing with the blood god through the books in the heavenly book pavilion, he might be able to solve the plague in the Eastern Sea. Time passed quietly, and 2 hours quickly passed. Ji Tianqing searched more than 30 bookshelves and finally found 4 books related to the ancient demon clan. He held the 4 books in his hands and quickly flipped through them with his divine soul power. Every book was very old and as thick as a brick. There was a lot of information recorded on them. He read page by page, carefully analyzing the contents. After about an hour, he reached the last few pages of the first book, which recorded a major event from the ancient era. In the ancient era, before the outbreak of the Great War of the Gods, the ancestor demon god rampaged through the world, wantonly slaughtering the experts of various races. The reason why he was so powerful, other than his own strength and profound demonic arts, was also because of the blood god Sion. The ancestor demon god used his own blood essence as a guide and supplemented it with various grievances of heaven and earth, ghosts, and the power of filth to create 3,000 scions of the blood god. The 3,000 scions of the blood god were like his descendants. They communicated with his divine soul and could also act as his clones. Every scion of the blood god carried the power of the 9 tribulations. Wherever they went, they would cause devastating disasters, causing a large number of deaths. After the creatures of various races were slaughtered by the 9 tribulations, they would produce an endless amount of blood, flesh, and soul power. The scions of the blood god were like vortexes, crazily devouring the blood energy in the sky. Their strength constantly increased. At that time in the Tian Xian land, the 3,000 scions of the blood god and tens of millions of demon soldiers wantonly conquered the world and slaughtered the people of various races. Hundreds of millions of creatures were slaughtered and poisoned. The scions of the blood god continuously obtained blood energy and soul power, and their strength also skyrocketed. During the Great War of the Gods, the 3,000 scions of the ancestor demon god had all reached the Saint Realm and possessed the power to destroy the world. Each scion of the blood god was comparable to the top experts of various races on the continent. When the 3,000 scions of the blood god gathered together, they were enough to contend against the gods of various races. Their strength was so powerful that it made the gods feel fear. Fortunately, during the epoch-making Great War of the Gods, the ancestor demon god was jointly killed by the strongest experts of the gods. The 3,000 scions of the blood god under his command were also annihilated by the many gods. After the Great War of the Gods, the ancestor demon god disappeared without a trace. The scions of the blood god also became history and did not appear again for tens of thousands of years. The experts of various races had forgotten what happened in the past and did not remember the monstrous blood disaster created by the scions of the blood god. Almost everyone believed that the scions of the blood god mystic technique had been lost and had disappeared with the ancestor demon god. However, after Ji Tianqing finished reading the contents of the book, his heart was extremely heavy, and his expression was somewhat ugly. I was right. The scions of the blood god can devour blood energy and souls to rapidly increase their strength. They can even surpass the essence soul realm and the 9th tribulation realm to reach the legendary saint realm. From the current situation, the dozens of scions of the blood god created by the fiend emperor are most likely at the heaven origin realm. Therefore, the poisonous plague they release is only effective on people below the soul tempering realm. It can't harm soul tempering experts. However, after the scions of the blood god create disasters and kill millions of people, they can devour blood energy and quickly reach the soul tempering realm. When that happens, even soul tempering experts won't be able to withstand the power of 9 tribulations. They will be corroded by the plague's poison and die. If the scions of the blood god are allowed to create disasters on the continent and wantonly slaughter the people of various races, their strength will skyrocket. When the dozens of scions of the blood god reach the soul tempering realm, the fiend race will become terrifyingly powerful. If those scions of the blood god reach the essence soul realm, the doomsday of the human, demon, and water races will arrive. At this thought, his heart was filled with anxiety and worry. However, he could only be patient and continue reading the other 3 ancient books. The second ancient book recorded many secrets of the fiend race, as well as information related to sacrificial rituals and cultivation. The third ancient book was similar. It didn't mention the scions of the blood god mystic technique. When Ji Tianqing flipped through the 4th book and reached the latter half, he found records regarding the scions of the blood god. It clearly recorded that the scions of the blood god weren't fiends, nor were they like humans or demons. Instead, they were a species between fiends and specters. The scions of the blood god had all kinds of strange appearances. Some were huge fiend beasts, some were demonic fog, and some were blood clouds. However, the scions of the blood god had a common characteristic: they were bloodthirsty. Devouring the blood energy and souls of all kinds of living beings was their nature. Be it the people of various races, warriors, demon beasts, snakes, or insects, they would never let them off. Chapter 1238. When Ji Tianqing flipped to the last few pages of the ancient book, his eyes lit up. The contents of these pages were related to how to deal with the blood god's illusions. He read word by word and quickly understood how to deal with the blood god's illusions. The blood god's illusions were a special kind of demon. They did not have a physical body, but they could devour blood and souls to grow stronger. Therefore, the blood god's illusions were very difficult to deal with. It was almost impossible to kill them with normal martial arts techniques. The fastest and most effective way to kill the blood god's illusions was to set up a heaven and earth array, stir up the wind and clouds, and activate the sacred power of lightning. The blood god's illusions were extremely mean and evil demons, while lightning was extremely young and strong. It was the perfect counter to the blood god's illusions. Of course, ordinary masters and martial arts masters could not control the power of lightning. Although this method was fast and effective, it was difficult to execute, but it was better than nothing. Another way to kill the blood god's illusions was to suppress them in the 5 extreme heavenly flames array and use the power of the 5 extreme heavenly flames to burn and purify them. This process was very slow and usually took 49 days to complete. Of course, the most difficult part was how to suppress the blood god's illusions in the array. This required a lot of effort from the martial artists. Other than these 2 methods, the ancient book also recorded 2 other methods to deal with the blood god's illusions. However, these 2 methods could only be done by saint and god state masters. For Ji Tianqing, these 2 methods were illusory and could not even understand them. Soon, he finished reading the 4th ancient book. He closed the ancient book and let out a sigh of relief. A gratified smile appeared on his face. Fortunately, I came to the heavenly book pavilion in time to check the information and learned about the blood god's illusions. If I went to the Tianquan plain, even if I found the blood god's illusions, I would not be able to do anything. Ordinary martial artists can't control lightning and can't do anything to the blood god's illusions. However, I am different. My thunder spiritual eyes can definitely kill the blood god's illusions. After muttering to himself, he put the 4 ancient books back on the shelf and got up to leave the heavenly book pavilion. After a while, his divine soul left Kenshin's tomb and returned to his body. He walked out of the secret room and walked around the peaceful Soil City Lord Manor to visit Yun Yao and the Jinshan King. After a few days of recuperation, Yun Yao's injuries had recovered to 80%. She would be fully recovered soon. The Golden Mountain King was still in a deep sleep, and his divine soul was still recovering. Thus, Ji Tianqing left the sword world with peace of mind. Shua! With a flash of light, he flew out of the broken sword and appeared beside Xiao Han. Xiao Han was galloping high up in the sky. He had been flying for 10 hours straight. Seeing Ji Tianqing appear, he quickly returned the broken sword with both hands and asked with concern, "Tianqing, how's your investigation going? Have you found any clues?" Ji Tianqing accepted the broken sword and nodded. "Don't worry, I've already found the information about the blood god and found a way to counter it." Xiao Han's eyes lit up when he heard this. He said excitedly, "That's great. Then we'll be able to find the blood god soon and eliminate it." Ji Tianqing was also looking forward to it. He nodded and said, "I hope we can save the people in time and not cause a disaster." Then, the 2 of them stopped talking and hurried on with all their might. After another 10 hours, the 2 of them finally crossed thousands of mountains and rivers and entered the Tianquan Plain. The Tianquan Plain was one of the largest plains in the eastern continent. It had a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. On this vast plain, there were boundless green grasslands and dark green forests everywhere. At the same time, there were dozens of cities and hundreds of villages on the Tianchuan plain. Tens of millions of people lived there. So far, the poisonous plague had only spread to the coastal cities. It had not spread to the Tianchuan plain yet. The 4 refugee camps set up by Xiao Han were at the edge of the plain. They were tens of thousands of miles apart. After the 2 of them entered the Tianchuan plain, they rushed to the first refugee camp, the A camp. After an hour, the 2 of them arrived in the sky above the A camp. Ji Tianqing stood high up in the sky and looked down. He saw that there were tents and mud huts everywhere on the grassland within a radius of 200 miles. Thousands of tents were like mushrooms, densely arranged on the grassland. Each tent could accommodate hundreds of people. The thousands of tents could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people temporarily. In addition to the tents, there were thousands of mud huts built around the perimeter. They were built by the soldiers of the Eastwood Army who dug up mud from the grassland. Around the refugee camp, there were tens of thousands of elite soldiers guarding it. There were also dozens of large formations set up by the Divine Origin stage experts to protect the entire camp. Millions of people who were suffering from the plague stayed in the tents and mud huts in low spirits. They relied on their meager living materials to support themselves. Fortunately, there was no poisonous plague in the refugee camp. There were also no strange movements in the surrounding area. Seeing this, Xiao Han and Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing stood high up in the sky and released the power of his soul to investigate the surrounding situation. Xiao Han landed in the refugee camp and gathered a few generals of the Eastwood Army. He cautioned them carefully. Half an hour later, the 2 of them left the refugee camp and quickly rushed to the second refugee camp, the B camp. The B camp was 40,000 miles away. It was located near a lush forest. When the 2 of them arrived, Ji Tianqing saw rows of wooden huts on the grassland in a radius of 200 miles. The structure of the wooden huts was simple, but they could accommodate dozens of people temporarily. The soldiers of the East Forest Army had cut down the trees in the forest and hurriedly built them with the materials they had gathered nearby. There were more than 8,000 wooden huts, which could accommodate more than 700,000 people. In addition to the wooden huts, there were many tents on the grassland. A large number of people lived in them. Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han were in the sky, observing the situation of the refugee camp. They used their soul to search for the aura of the demon clan. At this time, 2 Heaven Origin stage powerhouses in armor and carrying swords rushed over from afar. Ji Tianqing glanced at them and recognized them as the generals of the Eastwood Army. However, the 2 generals were running with all their might. Their faces were full of panic and worry. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han had a bad premonition. They hurried to meet them and blocked their way. The 2 generals were running in a hurry. They were about to scold someone when they were suddenly stopped. However, when they saw that it was Xiao Han, they panted with relief as if they had seen their savior. They anxiously reported the situation. "Greetings, Divine General. Divine General, you came at the right time. We are the generals of the C camp. Just now, a large amount of black gas suddenly appeared outside the camp. Many birds and beasts died and turned into blood and bones. Divine General, a poisonous plague is about to break out in the C camp. Please go and take a look." Hearing this, Xiao Han's face suddenly changed. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 1239. The appearance of the poisonous plague indicated the arrival of the blood god's son. Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han were excited and expectant, but more than that, they were filled with murderous intent. Xiao Han stared at the 2 generals with sharp eyes and asked sternly, "The 2 of you escaped in such a hurry. Did you care about the soldiers and the people in the camp?" The 2 generals were intimidated by his sternness. They immediately lowered their heads and reported in fear and trepidation, "General, you misunderstood us. We were not running away in fear. General, we were ordered by General Li to come to the second camp to report the news to prevent the poisonous plague from spreading and affecting the second camp. General Li is leading all the soldiers to protect and evacuate the people in the camp." Hearing their words, Xiao Han was slightly relieved. He quickly ordered, "Go to the second camp and report the news. I will go to the third camp now." After that, he rushed to the third camp with Ji Tianqing. The two brigadier generals bowed and hurriedly turned and flew toward the refugee camp not far away. 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han arrived at the third camp. The refugee camp was located on a dry grassland. Not far away, there was a vast forest. There were tents and wooden houses everywhere on the grassland within a radius of 200 miles. Millions of people were living in them. When they were still a few hundred miles away, Ji Tianqing could already see that the ground below was filled with groups of commoners. There were more than 800,000 people densely packed together. They flowed across the grassland like a tide and rushed toward them. Around the crowd, there were tens of thousands of East Forest soldiers in armor and swords. They were protecting the people closely. In the sky, there were 8 generals and generals in the sky origin stage. They were guarding the people vigilantly. Obviously, the poisonous plague had broken out outside the second camp. Everyone fled the refugee camp in a panic and ran toward the depths of the Tianchuan plain. A few hundred miles ahead, the second camp was located. The sky was filled with black fog and demonic qi. It was already covered by the poisonous plague. Seeing this scene, Xiao Han temporarily breathed a sigh of relief. At the very least, the civilians had escaped from the refugee camp and temporarily escaped the range of the poisonous plague. However, Ji Tianqing's expression became very serious. He had a bad premonition in his heart. This is bad. The demons have always been cunning and treacherous. I'm afraid this is their scheme. When Xiao Han heard his words, his expression immediately changed. He hurriedly asked, "Tianqing, what's wrong?" Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and explained with a solemn face, "A deadly plague has broken out in the 3rd Battalion, forcing all the soldiers and civilians to evacuate. However, the highly toxic plague that filled the sky would rapidly spread and soon overtake the hundreds of thousands of commoners. In addition, I suspect that this was done on purpose by the demons. The poisonous plague that they released before was just to force everyone to leave the refugee camp. Now, hundreds of thousands of civilians were running through the grasslands with almost no defense or protection. If the demons release a highly toxic plague at this time, it will be a bloody disaster." Xiao Han's expression changed. He nodded and said, "That's right. Tianqing, what you said is very reasonable. However, the highly toxic plague has already enveloped the 3rd Battalion. The civilians can only run. Fortunately, we arrived in time. There shouldn't be any problems." As he said that, he flew towards the vast and mighty crowd. However, at this moment, a disturbance suddenly broke out in the crowd that was as crowded as the tide. Several wisps of highly toxic black plague qi exploded like a mushroom cloud and quickly enveloped most of the crowd. The black qi rolled and covered the sky. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were crowded together and moved very slowly. Even when they saw the black qi erupting, they did not have time to avoid it. Moreover, the wisps of black qi exploded from different places and enveloped most of the crowd in the blink of an eye. Instantly, earth-shattering screams erupted from the crowd. They were howls of fear and despair. The rolling sound waves were like muffled thunder, rolling violently in the sky above the grasslands. Tens of thousands of weak civilians struggled and fell in the poisonous black qi. They lay on the grasslands, rolling and twitching in pain. Then, in just a few breaths, their bodies festered and turned into pools of blood, leaving only white bones. The boundless black qi covered the sky, causing the area within a radius of 200 miles to be dark. As the poisonous black gas spread out, the hundreds of thousands of civilians fell to the ground one after another like wheat being cut. Seeing this scene, Xiao Han, Ji Tianqing, and the many soldiers of the Eastern Forest Army were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They roared into the sky. "Ah! Damned demons, I will kill you all!" Xiao Han roared angrily and rushed toward the crowd with a murderous aura. He originally thought that he could protect the civilians by arriving at the 3rd Battalion in time. However, he never thought that the demons would release a highly toxic plague right under his nose and kill hundreds of thousands of civilians. At this moment, he was extremely angry. His body and mind were somewhat crazed by the monstrous killing intent. Of course, when the highly toxic plague broke out, he had already seen it clearly. The people who released the highly toxic plague were elite demon kings disguised as civilians. They all held the purple demonic gourd. He recklessly rushed into the crowd and brazenly pulled out his sword to kill the demon kings. The 8 generals in the sky were also furious. Their eyes turned blood red, and the murderous aura that surged out of their bodies condensed into blood-red flames. Even though they had been corroded by the black qi and were already infected with the highly toxic plague, they were not afraid. However, they didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. They didn't even think about whether they would die. They all pulled out their swords and sabers and fearlessly rushed into the crowd below to kill the demon kings who released the highly toxic plague. Not only the 8 generals, but even the 40,000 Eastern Forest Army around the crowd did not panic and flee. Even though the highly toxic plague had already spread and they were surrounded by the black qi, they were still calm and did their best to help the civilians escape. At this moment, the Eastern Forest Army's iron blood, pride, and dignity were undoubtedly displayed. Ji Tianqing's eyes were somewhat red, and his hands trembled in anger. The black qi floated in the air, and hundreds of thousands of civilians turned into blood and bones on the spot. It was a huge blow to him. Although he had seen the scene of a city full of bones before, it was not as tragic as this one. It was even more shocking. Under the highly toxic black qi that covered the sky, the civilians could not resist at all. They were poisoned to death like ants. Human lives were like grass, cheap and fragile. He had never hated the demons as much as he did now. He hated that he could not kill all the demons in the world. However, he did not rush into the crowd to kill the demon kings who released the highly toxic plague. Xiao Han and the 8 generals were enough to deal with them. He hurriedly released his spiritual energy and searched for traces of the blood god. After all, hundreds of thousands of civilians had been slaughtered on the spot, and a thick cloud of blood and qi filled the sky. Chapter 1240. Ji Tianqing originally thought that the blood god's son would be hiding in the crowd and devouring the blood qi. Or perhaps, the blood god's son would be hiding nearby and devouring the blood clouds in the sky. However, as he flew in the sky and searched the area with his divine soul, he couldn't find any trace of the blood god's son. He could only fly back to the sky above the crowd and use a secret martial arts technique to control the power of heaven and earth to create tornadoes. Swoosh! As he pushed out his palms, 2 terrifying tornadoes thousands of feet tall swept across the sky. Within a radius of 100 miles, an earth-shattering tornado immediately blew up. However, the howling tornadoes couldn't blow away the poisonous black gas that covered the sky. It was obviously unrealistic to use this method to disperse the poisonous plague. Ji Tianqing was filled with helplessness and anger. He extended his right palm and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb, releasing a white light vortex. The holy white light vortex was at least 10 feet wide and hung in the sky. The vortex released a terrifying devouring power that crazily devoured the poisonous black gas in the sky. This method was indeed effective. Endless poisonous black gas crazily rushed from all directions and was devoured by the white light vortex. After about 100 breaths, the poisonous black gas that covered 100 miles was completely devoured by the white light vortex. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Ji Tianqing removed the white light vortex and panted with a pale face. Using the technique like that just now consumed a lot of his magic power and made him very tired. Moreover, the heaven-mending orb in his mind had devoured too much poisonous black gas and had become dim. It was vaguely covered with a layer of black gas. Even with the power of the heaven-mending orb, it still needed a while to completely purify the poisonous black gas. On the vast grassland, everyone stopped running away and panted in shock. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked down at the ground below. He saw an extremely tragic scene. The grassland within 100 miles had become a black-red wasteland. All the flowers and plants had turned into black ash. The ground was completely soaked in blood and turned black-red. It emitted a bloody smell that filled the sky. At least 700,000 skeletons and corpses were strewn all over the wasteland. Tens of thousands of corpses were scattered on the grass in all directions. Some belonged to the Dong Lin army, while others belonged to ordinary warriors and commoners. The previously crowded crowd had now become scattered and scattered. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and counted that there were only 90,000 survivors. Most of them were commoners, while the rest were soldiers of the East Forest Army. Of course, of the 90,000 survivors, half of them were infected with the poisonous plague. Their bodies were emitting black smoke. Their skin and flesh were constantly festering, and black blood was oozing out. They were twitching and screaming in pain. Even if they had a certain amount of strength and were not dead for the time being. However, within 2 or 3 days at most, these tens of thousands of people would turn into blood and bones. Even the 8 Sky Origin Stage generals looked gloomy. They seemed to be in low spirits. They had been corroded by the poisonous plague and were destined to only live for a month. However, they were not afraid. They did not cry or go crazy. They all knelt in front of Xiao Han and asked for forgiveness in fear and trepidation. Lord Divine General. This subordinate is incompetent and failed to protect the people. Please grant this subordinate death, Lord Divine General. Lord Divine General. We are the generals of the Dong Lin army, but we could not even protect our people. We are ashamed to see the people of the East Sea. We only ask for death. Xiao Han stood on the grass expressionlessly and looked at the 8 generals indifferently. The 3 demon kings who had disguised themselves as commoners and released the poisonous black smoke had been killed by him. However, hundreds of thousands of commoners had died. The disaster had happened, and the facts could not be reversed. There was a monstrous hatred in his heart that could not be washed away by the water of the East Sea. After a long silence, he opened his mouth and said in a low voice, "Generals, the demon race is powerful. They are despicable and cunning. They are not something we can stop. Even if I came here personally, I could not stop the disaster from happening. I could only watch as hundreds of thousands of commoners were slaughtered. You have done your best and did not disgrace the dignity of the Dong Lin army. What crime are you guilty of? Moreover, you have all been poisoned by the plague. You will not live for long. How can I blame you?" The 8 generals had mixed feelings. They all lowered their heads silently to show their respect to Xiao Han. At this moment, Ji Tianqing flew down from the sky and landed beside them. "Generals, do not despair. Even if you have been poisoned by the plague, you will not die for sure. Everyone, clean up the battlefield and settle down the surviving commoners. In 3 days, I will cast a spell to help you clear the poisonous black smoke." Ji Tianqing looked at the 8 generals and said calmly. Hearing his words, the 8 generals turned to look at him in unison. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and surprise. They could not believe that there was someone who could clear the plague poison. They all looked at Xiao Han with questioning eyes. Xiao Han nodded and said in a dignified tone, "This is the number 1 genius of the continent, the number 1 genius of the imperial residence. He is Ji Tianqing, lord of the Tianjin region." The eyes of the 8 generals immediately lit up, revealing a look of incomparable reverence. They all bowed to Ji Tianqing and said in unison, "Greetings, Lord Ji. Thank you for saving our lives. Generals, please rise." Ji Tianqing raised his hand and gestured for them to rise. Then, Xiao Han ordered the 8 generals to clean up the battlefield and reorganized the surviving commoners and the Dong Lin army. He followed Ji Tianqing and left the battlefield, rushing to the 3rd camp. When the 2 of them arrived at the refugee camp, they saw the situation in the camp. It was a scene of devastation and devastation. The 200-mile radius of the refugee camp was still shrouded in the black smoke. Most of the thousands of tents and wooden houses in the camp had collapsed. Some were even on fire. Inside the tents, wooden houses, and the grass, there was black and red blood everywhere. Bones were scattered everywhere. When the plague broke out, at least 200,000 commoners did not have time to escape from the refugee camp and died on the spot. Ji Tianqing and Xiao Han searched the entire refugee camp and only found a few hundred survivors. However, these people were all poisoned and did not have long to live. After the disaster of the poison outbreak, the 3rd camp was destroyed. Out of the millions of commoners, only a few tens of thousands were left. Xiao Han ordered the 8 generals to bring the survivors to the 3rd camp and take shelter there. He and Ji Tianqing stayed where they were, standing in the air above the wasteland that was covered in bones. Seeing the 700,000 commoners' corpses on the wasteland, Xiao Han used the earth element's secret art and dug a huge pit in the wasteland. Then, he buried the countless corpses in the deep pit, letting the corpses of the people rest in peace. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered. He was thinking about a very important question. After Xiao Han was done, he came to his side and asked, "Tianqing, what are you thinking about? Did you find some clues?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a serious face, "So far, the 9 demon kings that were escorting the blood god Yin Qi were all killed by us. However, the blood god did not show up. We searched everywhere for it but could not find it. What does this mean?" Xiao Han was stunned and asked with a frown, "What does it mean? Could it be that it has been hiding in the dark and has not appeared?" "No." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, "It is indeed hiding in the dark. However, it must be nearby and secretly watching us. I am sure that it must have some special method to detect our presence." Chapter 1241. Ji Tianqing's words enlightened Xiao Han. He nodded and said, "That's right. I had the same idea. Tianqing, what do you plan to do next?" Ji Tianqing looked coldly at the sky, staring at the dark red blood energy that covered the sky. He said in a low voice, "Nearly 1 million people were killed. I don't believe the blood god will let go of such a large amount of blood energy and souls." Xiao Han frowned slightly. He looked up at the dark red blood mist and asked, "Are you going to wait for the blood god to devour the blood energy and then find it?" Ji Tianqing nodded. Xiao Han quickly waved his hand and said, "Tianqing, we tried this method before. It didn't work at all." Ji Tianqing explained, "Previously, when we used the blood aura as a clue to search for the blood god's son, it would discover us in advance and hide. But today is different. I will disguise myself as a demon. You can't follow me. I have to act alone. This." Xiao Han hesitated and asked worriedly, "Will this method work? If you face the blood god alone, I'm afraid you will be at a disadvantage." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said seriously, "The blood energy and souls have started to flow to the north. I have to act immediately. I don't have time to think too much." Then he landed on the wasteland from the sky. On the dark red wasteland, there were 3 broken corpses. They were the 3 demon kings that had been killed. His divine soul golden sword flew out from the top of his head and entered one of the demon king corpses. Under the control of his divine soul, the corpse moved as freely as a living person. In order to disguise himself more, he used a secret method to heal the injuries of the Demon King's body. He also carried a few purpline demonic gourds and had the power of the 3 disasters and 9 tribulations. After doing all this, he put his main body into the sword world. Then, he transformed into a Demon King and quickly flew into the sky, rushing towards the north. Xiao Han looked at his departing figure and sighed with a complicated expression. He murmured, "Tianxing, O Tianxing, you have always been resourceful and resourceful. I hope this method will succeed. The Blood God's son is mysterious and powerful. You must be careful. Nothing can happen to him." After a long time, when Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared into the horizon, he withdrew his gaze. Ji Tianxing controlled the body of the Demon King and flew in the sky in the form of a demon. His entire body was wrapped in a layer of black qi. No matter how one looked at it, he was an elite Devil King powerhouse. Only an expert at the 6th level of the soul refinement realm or above would be able to see through the flaws and discover that his soul was not that of a demon. But he believed that Blood God Yin Chi's strength hadn't reached the 6th level of the soul refinement realm yet. About 15 minutes later, he had flown over 1,000 miles away. In the gloomy sky, an invisible breeze blew, carrying the bloody mist that filled the sky as it flew towards the north. Ji Tianxing slowed down his flying speed and carefully observed the direction of the blood mist before continuing forward. Soon, another 15 minutes had passed. He flew over another 1,000 miles and arrived above a verdant forest. This lush forest had a circumference of over 10,000 miles, and it was filled with towering trees. Ji Tianxing keenly discovered that the bloody mist in the sky gathered above the forest and became extremely dense. Moreover, there was an area in the depths of the forest where the dark red blood mist condensed into a whirlpool. The whirlpool connected the sky to the forest and seemed to be connected to the ground. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a cold light. He thought to himself, "It should be here. The Blood God's son is indeed mysterious. I'm already so close, but I still can't sense its aura." He slowed down his flying speed and quietly flew into the forest towards the dark red whirlpool. At the beginning, the whirlpool didn't have any abnormalities and continued to devour the bloody mist. When Ji Tianxing got close, the whirlpool suddenly spun faster and condensed into a 100-meter-tall figure that rushed towards him. The figure was a giant. Its appearance was similar to that of the demon clan. It was extremely burly and exuded a monstrous bloody aura and a powerful aura. Its speed was as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Ji Tianxing and raised its fists to punch him. 2 fist shadows as large as houses smashed towards Ji Tianxing with destructive power. "Is this the Blood God's son?" Ji Tianxing stood in the air with an indifferent expression. He stared at the bloody giant and released a strong murderous intent. When the 2 fist shadows came at him, he calmly moved 100 meters away and easily dodged the giant's attack. Bang bang! The giant's fists released a dark red light and smashed into the forest, causing 2 dull explosions. Within a radius of 100 miles, the ground was shaking intensely. 2,000-meter-wide craters were created on the ground, with mud and wood chips splashing all over the sky. The bloody giant missed its attack, so it nimbly turned around and jumped at Ji Tianxing. It waved its hands and released 2 beams of red light. Swish swish! 200-meter-long dark red pillars of light shot toward Ji Tianxing with an aura that seemed capable of penetrating everything. Ji Tianxing calmly used the sword soul battle technique. His body flashed and passed between the 2 light pillars. He dodged the attack of the light pillars and rushed to the front of the blood-red giant. "You are only at the 9th level of the sky origin stage. If you are the Blood God's son, that would be disappointing." Ji Tianxing stared coldly at the blood-colored giant. As he shouted coldly, he waved the broken sword in his hand and slashed out a shocking sword light. "Draw your sword." 100-meter-long golden sword light slashed out diagonally from bottom to top, instantly hitting the blood-colored giant. Bang! With a deafening sound, the bloody giant was cut in half by the holy sword light and exploded. It collapsed into a bloody mist that filled the sky and spread out in all directions. Ji Tianqing checked it with his spiritual power. He found that the bloody mist was just the essence of blood. It didn't contain any of the 3 disasters and 9 tribulations power. He immediately concluded that the bloody giant was not the blood god's son. The real blood god's son was probably hiding underground. He immediately flew forward and used his divine soul power to investigate the situation underground. However, the blood mist that filled the sky gathered together and condensed into a ferocious and terrifying blood-colored giant demon. Roar! The 100-meter-tall giant demon was like a mutated demonic ape. It roared crazily and jumped at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing didn't look at it. He calmly took out his real body and put the golden sword into it. He turned back to his original appearance and threw the demon's body on the ground. At this moment, the giant demon had just gotten behind him. He swung his sword backward. Bang! With another muffled sound, the giant demon was cut in half by the golden sword light and turned into a bloody mist. Ji Tianqing strode over 10 miles and finally arrived at the blood god's son's hiding place. Chapter 1242. Whoosh! 9 blood-red pillars of light shot out from the depths of the ground and into the sky, illuminating half of the sky in a dark red color. 18 demonic dragons made of black smoke pierced through the ground and the forest. They flew up to the sky and formed a mysterious formation. The earth-shattering roar was like the roar of a primeval beast, but also like the roar of a primordial demon that had just woken up. At that moment, the sky changed color. The sun and the moon dimmed. Within 1,000 miles, the sky and the earth were covered by the blood-red light and the black smoke. It was like a ghost town. The air was filled with the smell of blood. The wind was blowing over the forest. The poisonous black smoke was spreading out. In the dense forest, whether it was the weak flowers or the towering trees that were 100 meters tall, they were all corroded by the black gas and turned into black ash on the spot. Without a doubt, that was the power of the poisonous plague. The man who made such a big noise was the blood god who was hiding in the ground. Ji Tianqing could feel that the 18 black dragons and the 9 blood-red light columns were all as powerful as the soul-refining stage cultivators. He deeply understood that such a shocking change in heaven and earth was caused by his breakthrough to the soul refinement realm. When he thought of this, his expression changed on the spot. His eyes surged with murderous intent, and his chest surged with intense hatred. Damn it! In the end, I was still a step too late. The blood god's son has broken through to the soul refining realm. He knew that when the blood god was born, he was only at the first or second level of the sky origin stage. Within 2 months, the blood god Yin Qi had killed millions of people with the poisonous plague. He had absorbed a huge amount of blood and souls. He had been growing stronger and stronger. Now, he had reached the soul refining stage. Once the blood god's son reached the soul refining realm, his strength would increase exponentially, and the power of his poison would be unstoppable. Even soul refinement realm experts would be corroded by the toxic plague and might even lose their lives. That was horrible. Blood god Yin Qi. Since I have found you, I will not let you leave alive. Ji Tianqing gnashed his teeth and growled. Ignoring the sky-piercing blood-red light and the threat of the 18 poisonous demonic dragons, he released his divine soul and sent it deep into the ground. He immediately saw a black and red glowing mist 3,000 meters below the ground, which was surging violently. The ball of black and red light was like a ball of light. It contained a terrifying power that caused one's heart to palpitate. It constantly changed shape and flashed with a dark red light. Without a doubt, that ball of black and red light was the real blood god's son, Yin Qi. It had reached the 9th level of heaven origin long ago and was about to break through to the soul refinement realm. That was why the three demon kings created this disaster and slaughtered almost 1,000,000 civilians. Now that it had devoured enough blood, chi, and souls, it had finally reached the soul-refining realm. It no longer feared anything and could wreak havoc in the human territory. It no longer needed to hide. Just as Ji Tianqing was about to rush into the ground, it had already rushed out of the ground and flew into the sky. It floated high in the sky, flashing with a dark red light. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a human, like a demon expert covered in blood-red light. Its body was tall and sturdy, and its face was ugly and ferocious. It even bared 2 sharp fangs. Even its long hair was condensed from endless blood-red light. It looked very evil. Even though Ji Tianqing knew that it was condensed from blood-red light and poisonous plagues, its body was solid and very real. If he had not seen its body change with his own eyes, Ji Tianqing would not have been able to tell if it was a demon in a short time. Yin Qi stood in the dark red sky filled with blood-red light, looking down at Ji Tianqing from above. There were 18 black demonic dragons circling around it, making it look extremely powerful and noble. It stared at Ji Tianqing and sized him up. It opened its wide mouth and sneered, "Little worm of the human race, I didn't expect you to have some intelligence. After only a few interactions with me, you could figure out my intentions. You even pretended to be a demon king to get close to me. If not for the fact that I was at the critical juncture of breaking through and had no time to take care of you, I would not have let you find me." Its voice was low and gloomy, making those who heard it feel extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. What made Ji Tianqing even more surprised was that it spoke in the human language. However, he was too lazy to waste time with Yin Qi. He murderously shouted, "Yin Qi, so what if you've broken through to the soul-refining realm? Don't you dare think about slaughtering my people. I will kill you today." As his voice fell, he brazenly drew his sword and slashed at Yin Qi. "Draw your sword." Whoosh! 100-meter-long golden sword light, carrying a holy and noble aura, slashed at Yin Qi from below at an extremely fast speed. Yin Qi's expression immediately changed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He waved his hands and controlled 2 demonic dragons to charge at the sword light without fear of death. The other 16 ferocious demonic dragons descended from the sky and rushed towards Ji Tianqing. They extended their claws and fangs and covered his body. Bang bang! With 2 muffled sounds, the 2 demonic dragons were shattered by the sword light. They turned into poisonous black gas and spread in all directions. The power of the golden sword light did not decrease at all. It hit Yin Qi again and cut him in half. However, the 2 halves of his body shone with red light. In the blink of an eye, they flew together and reformed into a complete body. At the same time, the 16 ferocious and terrifying demonic dragons also struck Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had already spread out his golden wings to protect himself. The 16 demonic dragons hit the golden wings one after another. A series of muffled sounds echoed between heaven and earth. The earth trembled violently from the impact. A deep pit with a radius of 100 miles appeared on the ground. Ji Tianqing was smashed into the bottom of the pit. His golden wings were buried by endless mud. The 16 demonic dragons all collapsed and turned into poisonous black gas that blotted out the sky and covered the sky for hundreds of miles. Ji Tianqing flew out of the deep pit unscathed. With the protection of the Kenshin bloodline and the heaven-mending pearl, he was not afraid of the black gas at all. He rushed to Yin Qi in the sky again and stabbed with the broken sword. Piercing sword. Whoosh! A cold light bloomed and disappeared in an instant. Before Yin Qi could react, he was hit by the cold light that was condensed to the extreme. Bang! Following a deafening explosion, the cold light exploded, turning into a dazzling white light that covered the heavens and earth. At that moment, the black gas in the sky was dispelled. The dark red blood light also became dim. Between heaven and earth, there was only the dazzling cold light that was infinitely bright. Yin Qi's body was blown to pieces on the spot. It turned into a black and red mist and scattered in the sky. However, it was not a body of flesh and blood. It was an extremely special blood god's son with a special constitution. It was only slightly injured. It immediately gathered together and reformed into a human form. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing had already arrived in front of it and let out a low shout filled with killing intent. Chapter 1243. The moment Yin Qi reformed his body, Ji Tianqing opened the third eye on his forehead. Thunder Spiritual Eye. When he was fighting Yin Qi, the 18 demonic dragons made a mess and obstructed his attack. Therefore, he resisted using the Thunder Spiritual Eye. After all, he only had one chance. If he missed it, it would be too difficult to kill Yin Qi again. But now, the 18 demonic dragons had been defeated, and he was in front of Yin Qi. Yin Qi had just reformed his body and was unprepared. This was definitely the best opportunity. He opened his golden Dharma eye, and the blue spiritual eye instantly released endless power of lightning. The azure blue lightning energy gathered into a lightning pillar as thick as a water bucket, and fiercely shot towards Yin Qi. Kaboom! An earth-shattering explosion resounded through the clouds and shook heaven and earth. At that moment, the destructive lightning struck Yin Qi, causing the sky to be illuminated by the dazzling lightning. The power of lightning was the most yang power in heaven and earth. In the hearts of all living beings, lightning represented heaven and earth. It was a power that only the gods could control. Yin Qi was the blood god son of the evil demon. He was an evil being and was most afraid of yang power. He had never thought that Ji Tianqing would be able to control the power of lightning that was most effective against him. When the pillar of lightning engulfed him, he revealed an extremely terrified expression and let out a miserable cry. No! But his miserable cry was immediately drowned out by the earth-shattering explosion. His body was also smashed into pieces by the pillar of lightning and disintegrated into countless black and red mist. The wisps of black and red mist were the power of the poison plague and the blood demon Dao. Within the lightning pillar, they quickly disappeared like snow melting away. The lightning that covered the sky lasted for 10 breaths of time in the sky before gradually dissipating. The blood god's son, Yin Qi, had been completely killed by the pillar of lightning. Only some scattered blood and black mist were still scattered in the sky. After a while, the loud noise that reverberated between heaven and earth disappeared. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Everything returned to normal. Ji Tianqing stood alone high in the sky and looked at the empty sky. He heaved a sigh of relief. The books in the heavenly tome pavilion didn't lie to me. Lightning really is the bane of the blood god. Thankfully, this blood god scion had only just broken through to the spirit refinement realm when I killed it with my lightning Dharma eye. If it was allowed to wreak havoc in the eastern sea and slaughter tens of millions of people, who knew how powerful it would become? At that time, I'm afraid that even if Xiao Han and I join forces, we won't be able to do anything to it. Thinking of this, he was still a little worried. He hurriedly cast a spell to gather the bloody light and black gas in the sky, and used the heaven-mending orb to devour them. Only after doing all this did he truly feel at ease. The blood god and the 9 demon kings were completely dead. The plague power and bloody light left behind by the blood god were all removed. The disaster and crisis of the East Sea had finally been resolved. Ji Tianqing relaxed and was about to turn around and fly away. At this moment, a green light streaked across the sky and arrived in front of Ji Tianqing in just a few breaths. The person who had come was Xiao Han. His expression was somewhat solemn, and his brows were filled with worry. When he saw Ji Tianqing and saw that Ji Tianqing was safe and sound, he let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly flew in front of Ji Tianqing and asked anxiously, "Tianqing, I just saw that the sky here was blood red, and there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth. Did something happen? Did you find the blood god Sion?" Did you fight with it? Where is it now? Xiao Han's mood was both worried and anxious. He asked several questions in one breath. Ji Tianqing revealed a trace of a smile and waved his hand at him. He persuaded, Lord Xiao, don't worry. Let's go back first. We'll talk as we go. Then, he flew back with Xiao Han. As they hurried back, he recounted what had happened. When Xiao Han heard that the blood god Sion had broken through to the spirit refinement realm and caused a phenomenon of heaven and earth, he was very worried. When he heard that Ji Tianqing had used the power of thunder to kill the blood god Sion, he was relieved and was full of excitement. I didn't expect the blood god Sion to grow so quickly. It reached the spirit refinement realm in just 2 months. Fortunately, Tianqing, you helped me. With your wisdom and strength, you successfully killed the blood god Sion. If it weren't for your help, I really wouldn't know what to do. The consequences would be unimaginable. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a heavy expression, the blood god Sion is a special kind of demon. It can't be judged by common sense. As long as it massacres creatures and obtains enough blood, its strength will skyrocket. It will be 100 times stronger than any genius martial artist. The reason why the blood god Sion's strength increased so quickly was because of the lives of millions of people. Xiao Han said with hatred, Tianqing, now that you've killed the blood god Sion Yin Qi, it can be considered as revenge for the people who died. It's a pity that millions of people have died. Even if you kill the blood god Sion 1,000 times, you won't be able to save their lives. Ji Tianqing patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. The blood god Sion plan was a conspiracy of the ancient demon emperor. The purpose was to bring chaos to the 3 major races and the entire Tianxian continent. Not only the people of the East Sea suffered, but the people and martial artists of all races on the continent also suffered. The dead are gone, but the living still need to be taken care of. Lord Xiao, you still have to cheer up and settle the millions of homeless people and rebuild the coastal cities. Your mission is still very important. Xiao Han nodded and said solemnly, Tianqing, I know all of this. Don't worry, I'll make proper arrangements for the follow-up. After this disaster, the cities of the East Sea will need at least 10 years to recover. Fortunately, with your help, we were able to kill the blood god Sion in such a short time. You saved the millions of people of the East Sea. You are the second parent of the people and the hero of the East Sea. Let's return to the Black Rock City now. I want to announce this matter and let the people of the East Sea remember your kindness forever. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, Lord Xiao, protecting the people of my race is the duty and obligation of us martial artists. As for the titles of second parent and hero, there's no need for them. Xiao Han also revealed a smile and said, Tianqing, I know you don't care about these titles. You saved the people, not only because of morality, but also because of friendship. It's definitely not for the sake of reputation. But you have made such a great contribution and saved the millions of people of the East Sea's 100 cities. This is an indelible fact. I'm just announcing the news as it is and will not flatter you. After the people know the news, how they feel about you, that's their business. Why should you care? Chapter 1244. 2 days later, in the Black Rock City. Although the great defensive array of the Black Rock City was still activated, it was still shining with colorful lights. But the poisonous black gas inside and outside the city had faded a lot. It was almost impossible to see it clearly with the naked eye. In at most 3 to 5 days, the poisonous black gas that filled the world would gradually dissipate. The atmosphere in the city, from the previous dull and dead silence, became lively and relaxed. The reason was that the Divine General's estate had announced a great piece of news yesterday. The number 1 genius of the continent, the number 1 genius of the imperial residence, Tianqian region Lord Ji Tianqing, had found the source of the poisonous plague 2 days ago and killed it with a thunderous method. Such a simple piece of news, when it was spread in the Black Rock City, it instantly caused the people of the city to boil. Since the outbreak of the poisonous plague, in the past 2 months, all the people were in a heavy mood, gloomy and hopeless. Everyone was holed up in the city, hiding in dark cellars or secret rooms, waiting for the day when the poisonous plague would penetrate the great defensive array and invade the city. The taste of waiting in despair for death made everyone feel that there was nothing left to live for. They were both angry and helpless. Today, Ji Tianqing had found the source of the poisonous plague and killed it. The haze that shrouded everyone's hearts finally disappeared. The crisis of the East Sea cities was resolved. The people no longer had to worry about the poisonous plague. After experiencing despair and surviving the crisis of death, the people welcomed a pleasant surprise and celebration. Nearly 1 million people in the city were discussing this matter enthusiastically. The streets and alleys were singing the praises of Ji Tianqing's name and deeds. Everyone was full of admiration, worship and gratitude for him. They regarded him as the savior of the Black Rock City, the second parent of the people of the city. The news announced by the Divine General's estate not only spread in the Black Rock City, it also spread to the coastal cities. Even the 3 refugee camps on the Tianchuan Plain received the news. The hundreds of millions of people in the hundreds of cities, like the people of the Black Rock City, were overjoyed and excited to the extreme. The cities were immersed in the celebration, bustling with noise and excitement. Hundreds of millions of people were singing praises of Ji Tianqing, shedding tears of gratitude and prostrating themselves in worship. In just a few days, the news and Ji Tianqing's reputation had spread throughout the eastern coast. This time, he had also become a well-known hero in the Eastern Sea, receiving the gratitude and worship of billions of people. Ji Tianqing spent 2 days recuperating in the Divine General's estate in Black Rock City. Xiao Han, Xiao Chen, Xiao Ling and the others were busy dealing with government affairs, restoring order to the coastal cities and comforting the people who were affected by the disaster. The post-disaster reconstruction work was also being carried out in an orderly manner. Ji Tianqing estimated that it would take Xiao Han at least 2 years to settle down the citizens of the various cities in the East Sea. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, he was meditating in his room when Yun Yao's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Tianqing, my injuries have healed." Ji Tianqing suddenly showed a trace of joy, and quickly opened the exit of the sword world. Swoosh! With a flash of silver light, Yun Yao flew out of the sword world and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. She looked at Ji Tianqing and saw that he was safe and sound. Then she looked around and asked, "Tianqing, where are we?" Ji Tianqing explained, "This is the Divine General's estate in Black Rock City. When I came here before, 9 demon kings escorted the blood god here and spread the poisonous plague everywhere." He explained what had happened a few days ago to Yun Yao. After Yun Yao heard it, she knew that such a drastic change had happened in the various cities in the East Sea while she was in seclusion to heal her injuries. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing used his wisdom to find the blood god in the shortest time possible and killed him. Otherwise, the various cities in the East Sea would have suffered an even greater disaster, and the people would have been plunged into misery and suffering. The two of them talked for a long time and only ended at noon. Yun Yao thought for a while and said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, now that the blood god has been eliminated by you, the crisis of the various cities in the East Sea has been resolved. Divine General Donglin has to preside over the reconstruction work after the disaster and busy himself with various official matters. We can't help him by staying at the Divine General's estate and will only delay his time. Why don't we take our leave now and head to the East Sea's returning ruins as soon as possible to do our own things?" Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. "That's right, I have the same idea. We will go and bid farewell to Lord Xiao later." After the two of them agreed, they left the room together and went to the main hall of the Divine General's estate to bid farewell to Xiao Han. In the main hall, Xiao Han was sitting on the main seat and handling official matters. Xiao Ling stood beside him and was busy helping him deal with official documents and memorials. More than 20 Donglin army generals and city lords stood on both sides of the main hall and took turns to report the news and situation. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao arrived, Xiao Han hurriedly stood up to welcome them. The generals and city lords in the hall also bowed and saluted to Ji Tianqing, expressing their utmost respect. Xiao Ling'er's gaze landed on Yun Yao and sized her up with a complicated expression. When Xiao Han introduced Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao to everyone, her body trembled and her eyes dimmed. Yun Yao's peerless beauty and goddess-like temperament made her feel ashamed of her inferiority. At this moment, she saw Yun Yao with her own eyes. Only then did she know that Ji Tianqing's beloved wife was actually so beautiful and peerless. She also finally understood why Ji Tianqing had always been indifferent to her confession and intimacy. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but lower her head. Her eyes were slightly red as she thought to herself, probably only a peerless beauty like Yun Yao is worthy of the perfect big brother Tianqing, right? At this moment, Ji Tianqing explained the purpose of his visit to Xiao Han and bowed to him to bid him farewell. Naturally, Xiao Han warmly urged him to stay, hoping that he and Yun Yao could stay in Black Rock City for a few more days. Tianqing, I should have treated you well and let you rest here for a few days when you came to Black Rock City this time. I didn't expect that you would encounter the poisonous plague. Not only did I not let you rest, I even troubled you to take the risk with me. Tianqing, please stay for a few more days and let me make up for it. Also, let the Donglin army and the people of the various cities have a chance to express their gratitude in person. Xiao Han sincerely urged them to stay, and the Donglin army's generals and city lords in the main hall also chimed in. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao tactfully rejected everyone's kind intentions, saying that they still had something important to do and had to complete it as soon as possible. Both sides bid farewell. Xiao Han led the generals and city lords and personally sent Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao off from the Divine General's estate. Everyone stood at the gate of the Divine General's estate and watched Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao fly into the sky. Their figures gradually disappeared before they turned around and returned to the estate. Chapter 1245. After Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao left the Black Rock City, they rushed to the Eastern Sea's returning ruins with lightning speed. Although the sky above the coastal area was still filled with some scattered poisonous black air, it would not pose a threat to them. After 4 hours, the two of them were far away from the Black Rock City and were flying above the vast sea. After a long silence, Yun Yao could not help but ask, Tianqing, that girl standing next to Divine General Donglin. Is she his daughter? When Yun Yao asked this question, she tried her best to maintain a calm tone and expression. On the surface, it seemed that she only asked casually and did not have any other intentions. However, Ji Tianqing was connected to her mind and could immediately feel that she cared about this matter. She only asked after thinking for a long time. A woman's intuition is terrifyingly accurate. Today, Yao Yao saw Xiao Ling for the first time, and she could sense the abnormality. As this thought flashed across his mind, he also answered with a calm expression, no, that girl is called Xiao Ling, she is a disciple of the Xiao clan. According to seniority, she is Xiao Han's niece. Oh. Yun Yao nodded and did not ask any more questions. She and Ji Tianqing were connected in their minds. They were each other's true love. There were many things and words that the two of them could understand without speaking. This was telepathy. Although she could see that Xiao Ling had deep feelings for Ji Tianqing and had fallen in love with him. However, she knew Ji Tianqing's personality and trusted him unconditionally. This matter was only mentioned briefly and there was no need to say anything more. The Eastern Sea's returning ruins was located in the northeast direction of the endless Eastern Sea and was close to the northern desert. It would take more than a month to travel from the Black Rock City to the Eastern Sea's returning ruins. After traveling for half a month, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao entered the deep part of the Eastern Sea. Under the vast sea surface, not only were there endless fishes, there were also hundreds of millions of people of the Water Clan. That evening, the setting sun shone on the vast sea, emitting a dense golden light. Ji Tianqing was flying rapidly above the sea when he suddenly sensed that there was a huge change in the world inside the broken sword. His soul entered the world within the sword, and he immediately saw a mountain range thousands of kilometers away from peaceful Soil City. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and golden light soared into the sky. The sky within 1,000 miles was covered by dark clouds. Purple and blue lightning arcs were crazily shuttling and exploding in the clouds. Muffled rumbling noises echoed in the sky one after another. A fierce wind blew between the heavens and the earth, stirring up dust and gravel that filled the air, forming several tornadoes that were thousands of feet high, wreaking havoc in the mountains. At the foot of one of the mountain peaks, divine golden light surged wildly from the ground and shot up into the sky, illuminating half of the sky with golden light. Such an earth-shattering scene was clearly visible to the entire sword world. In peaceful Soil City thousands of kilometers away from the mountain range, the several thousand people of the Earth Spirit clan were also alarmed by this great change in the world. Countless Earth Spirit clansmen stared fearfully at the sky and in the direction of the mountain range in confusion. All of peaceful Soil City was in an uproar. The people were filled with worry as they whispered to each other, wondering if some great calamity was about to occur. However, when Ji Tianqing saw the scene in the mountains, he immediately smiled in relief. His heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. This was because he knew that this was not the wrath of the world, nor was it the omen of some calamity. This was clearly a natural phenomenon caused by someone breaking through to the soul refinement realm. He clearly remembered that after the little black dragon and Qian Yu devoured the sacred phoenix heart, they had been cultivating in seclusion near peaceful Soil City. Calculating the time, 2 or 3 months had passed. The little black dragon and Qian Yu should have succeeded in refining the sacred phoenix heart. As a result, Ji Tianqing flew into the sword world and arrived above the mountains. He did not fear the wind and lightning. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he stared at the mountain radiating with golden light. After a long while, the heaven-shaking winds and lightning gradually subsided. The black clouds in the sky also slowly dissipated. At the foot of the mountain, a heaven-shaking dragon's roar suddenly rang out. Roar! As the dragon's roar rang out, a black dragon that was over 10,000 feet long emerged from the bottom of the mountain. Its body was majestic and mighty to the extreme. It twisted its massive body and flew into the sky like a streak of black light, dancing in the air. When Ji Tianqing saw its appearance, he immediately smiled in relief. He muttered, "This little black dragon has finally refined the sacred phoenix heart and successfully broken through to the soul refinement realm." However, after breaking through to the soul refinement realm, not only has its body grown 10 times larger, even its outer appearance has changed. He could clearly see that the black dragon had not only grown to 10,000 feet long, but its outer appearance had also undergone subtle changes. The dragon horns on its forehead had become even more protruding and curved like antlers. Its eyes had become even more profound, imbued with a powerful sense of majesty. Most importantly, it originally only had 4 legs, but now it had a 5th leg. Not only had its strength increased by several times, its aura had become even more sacred and majestic. How could this be? How could the little black dragon's appearance change? It seems to have evolved to become even more noble. Could this be a change brought about by the sacred phoenix heart? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows in confusion as he carefully observed the black dragon. At this time, the black dragon calmed down and hurriedly suppressed the excitement in its heart. It swooped down from the sky and flew to Ji Tianqing's side. It looked at Ji Tianqing with bright eyes and said in a pleasantly surprised voice, "Old Ji. I have successfully refined the sacred phoenix heart and broken through to the soul refinement realm. Old Ji, thank you so much. If not for the sacred phoenix heart you gave me, I would never have broken through to the soul refinement realm so quickly. Moreover, I feel that after breaking through to the soul refinement realm, a mysterious door has opened, leading to an even more sacred and powerful world." After crossing this door, my talent and potential have completely exploded, allowing me to have limitless possibilities. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed a gratified smile and nodded. The divine origin realm and the soul refinement realm are the differences between the ordinary and the extraordinary. You have reached the soul refinement realm and have indeed stepped into a new realm, entering into a more profound world of martial arts. With the help of the sacred phoenix heart, your talent and aptitude will of course increase greatly. When you reach the soul refinement realm, it will all explode. I believe that your path of cultivation will be smooth from now on and the speed at which you increase your strength will be much faster. As he spoke, he released his spiritual strength and searched for traces of Qianyu. Little black dragon, you have already refined the sacred phoenix heart and broken through to the soul refinement realm. Logically speaking, Qianyu should have finished refining it, right? The black dragon gently shook its head and said with a complicated tone, Qianyu has not finished refining it and is still in closed-door cultivation. I don't know when she will break through to the soul refinement realm. Chapter 1246. Qianyu was still in seclusion to refine the dragon phoenix sacred heart, so Ji Tianqing did not disturb her. He left the sword world with the black dragon and returned to the sky above the East Sea. When the black dragon appeared in the sky, its huge body brought about a huge gust of wind, casting a huge shadow on the surface of the sea. It let out a joyful dragon roar and circled in the sky before flying in front of Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Yunyao also revealed an expression of disbelief when she saw such a huge change in the black dragon. She was happy and gratified for it. After chatting for a while, the black dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to the returning ruins of the East Sea. Now that the black dragon had reached the first tier of the soul refinement realm, its flying speed was unbelievably fast. It could travel 120,000 miles in a day. Although this was not as fast as Ji Tianqing's sword kinesis flight, it was still very powerful. However, its magic power was incomparably abundant, and its strength lasted for a long time. Even flying continuously for a month wouldn't be a problem. 5 days later, the black dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao and flew in the Northeast Sea. Below them was a boundless blue sea. There were a few scattered islands every few tens of thousands of miles. Yunyao sat upright on the back of the black dragon, meditating the entire time. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back and looked at the sea in front of him. His expression became more and more serious. His brows were tightly knitted as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, the black dragon turned to look at him and said in a low voice, "Old Ji, I feel that something is wrong with this sea." Ji Tianqing's thoughts were interrupted. He looked at it with a surprised expression and asked, "You also see the problem?" "Yes." The black dragon gradually slowed down and said in a low voice, "I feel that the color of the sea water in this sea seems to be darker. It's also emitting poison. I also noticed that there are many corpses of fish, prawns, and aquatic demons floating on the sea." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a serious expression, "That's right. The sea water in this sea is indeed very poisonous. Those fish, prawns, and aquatic demons were all poisoned to death. If I'm not wrong, something must have happened to this part of the sea. There must be more corpses buried at the bottom of the sea." Black Dragon was silent for a moment, and then worriedly asked, "Old Ji, could it be that the Aqua clan is in trouble? Should we go take a look? After all, you and Tai are sworn brothers, and I am also a member of the Black Dragon race." Ji Tianqing only thought about it for a moment before he nodded in agreement. "All right, let's go to the bottom of the sea and see what's going on. I have a bad premonition. I hope it won't come true." Yunyao had been awakened by their conversation. She opened her eyes and looked at Ji Tianqing, asking, "Tianqing, do you have a bad feeling? Do you mean that the changes in this sea area have something to do with the blood god and the demons?" Ji Tianqing slightly nodded, then continued in a deep voice, "By now, the demon clan has sent out a great number of blood gods, crazily slaughtering the people of the three kinds, including the water kind. If a blood god sneaks into the East Sea and slaughters the people in the territory of the water kind, it will be troublesome." Yunyao understood his concern and quickly nodded. "In that case, let's not rush to the ruins of the East Sea. Let's go to the bottom of the sea and see what's going on first." As soon as she finished speaking, Black Dragon descended from the sky and dived into the vast East Sea with a swoosh. It was a dragon of the sea, so it could travel through the vast sea effortlessly. Instead, it was like a fish in water. Moreover, Black Dragon, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao were all in the soul-refining realm. They were not afraid of the poison in the sea at all. In just a few short breaths, Black Dragon had dived to a depth of 5 kilometers. The light in the deep sea was dim, the water was cold, and the pressure was extremely high. It was dead silent in all directions. No sound could be heard, and not a single fish could be seen. Under Ji Tianqing's command, Black Dragon continued to dive into the sea. When it reached a depth of 15 kilometers, it finally reached the bottom of the sea that was full of reefs and corals. The cold bottom of the sea contained rich mineral resources. There were many rocks and reefs that contained metal components. There were also glowing aquatic plants that would emit a faint light. However, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao looked around and found that the aquatic plants and corals at the bottom of the sea had all withered and died. There were also large piles of fish corpses in the reefs and mud. Most of them were rotten and only bones were left. The seawater contained strong poison. There was also black blood and rotten flesh that could be seen with the naked eye swimming slowly with the current. Black Dragon quickly traveled through the dark bottom of the sea and flew towards the northeast. During this process, everyone could only see that the bottom of the sea was covered in white bones. They were all the corpses of various fish and aquatic creatures. From giant whales that were thousands of meters long to palm-sized fish, prawns, and shells, none of them were spared. Even the aquatic demons and aquatic creatures that had a certain level of strength could not escape the corrosion of the poison. After they died, they turned into rotten bones and lay on the dark and cold bottom of the sea. 2 hours later, Black Dragon had traveled more than 10,000 kilometers under the sea. An underwater city appeared in front of everyone. This was an ancient city with a circumference of tens of miles. It was situated on a flat reef, built from countless huge pitch-black reefs. The walls of the ancient city and the buildings in the city were covered in aquatic plants and aquatic plants. They looked very strange and rare. If it was a normal day, the hundreds of thousands of aquatic creatures living in the city would be herding billions of fish and prawns and raising countless powerful aquatic creatures. The dense schools of fish and all kinds of glowing fish and aquatic creatures would also bring a faint light to the ancient city. Colorful corals would also grow in the ancient city, bringing beautiful colors to the dark ancient city. Such an underwater ancient city was beautiful and magnificent. It was exhilarating and exciting. However, when Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrived at the top of the ancient city, they could not see such a beautiful scene. What they saw was a cold and dark ancient city. There was not a trace of light or colorful colors. There were only hundreds of millions of dead fish and prawns, and hundreds of thousands of dead aquatic creatures and aquatic creatures piled up in the city, exuding a chilling aura of death. Seeing such a tragic scene, Yunyao and Black Dragon both had heavy hearts. Ji Tianqing flew into the ancient city and opened his pure heart Dharma eye. He released his divine soul power and carefully checked the situation in the city. After a while, he figured out the reason and said to Yunyao, "Yao Yao, I was right. This underwater ancient city and this sea area were destroyed by the poison." Yunyao asked with a serious face, "Tianqing, are you sure this has something to do with the blood god and the demon race?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said coldly, "I've been in contact with the poisonous plague in the coastal cities and killed the blood god's son with my own hands. I'm not unfamiliar with the power of calamity. I'm sure this is the work of the blood god and the demon race. Chapter 1247. Yunyao had always believed Ji Tianqing's words without a doubt. However, she frowned in confusion and asked, Tianqing, the son of the blood god, Yin Qi, spread a poisonous plague in the coastal cities. It was a powerful black gas. In this endless eastern sea, I am afraid the black mist would not spread far. I am afraid the poison in the sea water is not the poisonous black qi, right? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, That's right, Yao Yao, you have observed carefully. The poison in this sea is not a poisonous plague, but a form of black water. The black water is extremely poisonous and one drop can kill an elite warrior at the Sky Prime stage. Even if the poisonous black water is mixed in the sea and its toxicity is weakened many times, it can still easily kill living creatures below the Sky Prime stage. I estimate that even the elite warriors and water demons at the Sky Prime stage would not last long after being corroded by the poisonous black water. Yunyao nodded slightly and said thoughtfully, This way, the blood god that spread the poison in this sea is different from Yin Qi. He also carries a different calamity power. Ji Tianqing agreed and said with a cold tone, Although the blood god has different calamity power, they are all born from the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations. Each blood god is escorted by elite warriors of the demon clan. Those elite warriors of the demon clan can also use the purple Yin demonic gourd to spread the calamity power. Besides, these blood god were only at the Sky Prime stage when they were born. After they killed a large number of living creatures, they absorbed a huge amount of blood and souls to break into the refined soul stage. I don't know how long the disaster has happened in this sea area, and how powerful is the blood god's son now. Yunyao thought for a moment and said with a solemn expression, Tianqing, we are not familiar with the situation in this sea area. We don't know what happened and it's difficult to solve this problem. I think we should first find the ruler of this sea area and then think of a solution. Okay. Ji Tianqing nodded without hesitation and let the black dragon speed up. In the next few hours, the black dragon traveled at a rapid speed under the sea. The bottom of the ocean for 100,000 miles in radius was almost covered in dead bodies of all kinds of fish and aquatic creatures. Even the few cities that they passed by were piled up with mountains of corpses, becoming uninhabited dead cities. Around 20 hours later, the black dragon flew for 100,000 miles and finally met a few living water-kind powerful beings. They were 4 Sky Origin Stage water-kind warriors, and they looked like human beings. However, their bodies had obvious aquatic characteristics, such as fish scales and fish tails, and so on. They flashed across the bottom of the ocean, heading north as fast as they could. The black dragon stopped them and told them the name of Ji Tianqing, as well as the purpose of their visit. Although the 4 Aqua tribe experts had never heard of Ji Tianqing's name, they were very respectful to Ji Tianqing and Prince Tai after learning that Ji Tianqing was a friend of Prince Tai. After some negotiation, Ji Tianqing found out that the 4 water tribe experts were the commanders of the searching dragon guards in the Black Ink Sea area. The area within a radius of 500,000 miles was the territory of the Black Ink Sea area, which was under the jurisdiction of the Black Ink Dragon King and belonged to the imperial court of the water tribe. There were 150,000 searching dragon guards under the Black Ink Dragon King, who were responsible for patrolling and protecting this area. Since half a month ago, a strong poison of unknown origin appeared in the Black Ink Sea area, which killed hundreds of millions of aquatic creatures in just a few days, causing a huge disaster. In the past half a month, the mysterious strong poison had spread crazily, almost affecting the entire Black Ink Sea area. At least 30 million aquatic creatures were corroded by the strong poison, and had died and turned into skeletons. The remaining 300 million aquatic creatures were also escorted and led by the searching dragon guards, and they left the Black Ink Sea area in batches. The 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were all candidates to bring up the rear, and they were responsible for searching for the remaining and lost aquatic creatures. Originally, they each led 2,000 searching dragon guards, which made a total of 8,000 people. However, in the 5-day search and rescue process, the 8,000 searching dragon guards were all dead. Even the thousands of aquatic creatures they had rescued were all dead. Now there were only 4 of them left, and they were unable to carry out the mission anymore. They could only leave the Black Ink Sea area at the fastest speed, and go to the neighboring Long Wind Sea area. After hearing the news, Ji Tianxing carefully looked at the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards. He immediately found that the 4 commanders were also corroded by the strong poisonous black water. Their bodies were already covered with black smoke, and many parts of their skin had been festered, with black blood constantly flowing out. It seems that I was right. Even the Sky Origin stage powerhouses of the Water Tribe could not resist the corrosion of the strong poisonous black water. According to their situation, if they don't get rid of the strong poison as soon as possible, I am afraid that they will not live for more than half a month. The 4 commanders also knew this. Their expressions were extremely dejected and pained. Their dim eyes were filled with helplessness and despair. One of them nodded and bowed to Ji Tianxing. "Young Master Ji, the 4 of us have been poisoned, and we will not live for long. This place is hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Long Wind Sea area. If we don't get back in time, we will die on the way. Young Master Ji, please send a message for us. In any case, we have to bring the result and the news back, and report to the Black Ink Dragon King. Even if we are destined to die, we have to die in a meaningful way." Ji Tianxing calmly glanced at the 4 of them, and he saw that they all had the same expression, and their eyes were very determined. He waved his hand and said in a deep voice, "You don't have to be so depressed. I will take you to the Long Wind Sea area now, and meet with the Black Ink Dragon King." As he said, he waved his hand and put the 4 of them on the back of the Black Dragon. Then, the Black Dragon carried them through the cold bottom of the sea, and rushed to the Long Wind Sea area as fast as lightning. The Black Dragon was so fast that the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were stunned, and they were also quite excited. There were thousands of different races in the East Sea, and they were all called the aquatic creatures, and they were all under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Court of the Aquatic Creatures. In the East Sea, the Flood Dragon race was the noblest and the most powerful race. The 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were just ordinary members of the sea, and they rarely came in contact with the noble Flood Dragon race. They did not dare to imagine that one day, they would be able to ride the noble Black Dragon and travel hundreds of thousands of miles under the sea. Even if the 4 of them were to die soon, it was still an incomparable glory and something to be proud of. A whole day passed quickly. The Black Dragon finally traveled 140,000 miles, left the poison-shrouded Black Ink Sea area, and entered the Long Wind Sea area. Under the guidance of the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards, the Black Dragon rushed to the Origin City at the fastest speed. It was an underwater ancient city at the edge of the Long Wind Sea area, and it was also the main city that accommodated millions of people of the Sea Clan. Most of the people of the Sea Clan who evacuated from the Black Ink Sea area fled there. The Black Ink Dragon King and a large number of searching dragon guards also gathered in that ancient city. Everyone thought that they would be safe after escaping from the Black Ink Sea area and arriving at the Origin City. Chapter 1248. When Ji Tianxing saw the blood qi in the seawater, he had a bad feeling. It was clearly the blood qi and soul essence of the Water Clan's people, fish, and water demons after they died. Strands of dark red blood qi mixed in the black seawater and kept flowing into the distance. The poisonous black water has already spread to this part of the sea. The situation is probably worse than we expected. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and muttered with a solemn expression. Yunyao nodded and pointed at the ancient city in the darkness ahead. She said, "Tianxing, look. The Origin City is shining with magic power. It's obviously protected by a soul-level formation. The Black Ink Dragon King and a large group of searching dragon guards are in that ancient city. It should be fine in the short term. Let's go take a look first. Ji Tianqing nodded and let the black dragon swim towards the origin city. When he got closer, he could see clearly that the ancient city under the sea made of reddish-brown rocks was also covered with thick seaweed. Colorful corals grew everywhere in the city. A soul-level formation with a radius of nearly 100 miles protected the entire ancient city like an inverted bowl. The seawater outside the light shield was cold and black, containing deadly poison. The seawater inside the light shield was still pure and light blue. Tens of thousands of Water Clan martial artists, wearing silver armor and holding spears and swords, cruised in the sky above the ancient city and monitored the surroundings. Around 1 million water-kind people crowded in the city, letting out deafening noises. The black dragon arrived outside the city gate. The 4 searching dragon guards took out their identity badges and stated their purpose. Only then were they allowed to enter the city. However, the black dragon, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao's identities were unknown, so the city guards refused to let them enter the origin city. The 4 searching dragon guards were a little angry and puzzled. They quickly introduced Ji Tianqing's identity and asked the city guards to let them in. However, the city guards were from the origin city and were under the jurisdiction of the Changfeng Sea region. They had nothing to do with the Black Ink Sea region. Of course, they would not listen to the words of the 4 searching dragon guard commanders and insisted on carrying out the orders of the city lord of origin city. In desperation, the 4 searching dragon guards had to apologize to Ji Tianqing and said that they would report this matter to Xian Mo Dragon King after entering the city. Ji Tianqing didn't say much and waved his hand, indicating for the 4 to enter the city. He and Yun Yao stood calmly on the black dragon's back, waiting patiently. Black Dragon's mood was somewhat gloomy. He said in a resentful tone, "Old Ji, this bunch of stinky fish really don't know what's good for them. How dare they treat us like this? We helped them with good intentions, but they actually refuse to let us in. How despicable." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, "Little black dragon, you can't say that. Such a great disaster happened in the Black Ink Sea area, so the water-kind people must be scared to death. Right now, they were out of their wits, and every bush and tree was an enemy. Of course, they would be extremely cautious and wouldn't dare to be careless in the slightest. Don't worry, the 4 searching dragon guards have already gone to report the news. I believe Xian Mo Dragon King is a reasonable person and will soon come to welcome us." Black Dragon was originally feeling indignant for Ji Tianqing, so when he saw that Ji Tianqing didn't care, the resentment in his heart dissipated. Yun Yao raised her eyebrows and asked, "Tianqing, have you met Xian Mo Dragon King? Does he know you?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. Yun Yao suddenly frowned and said with some concern, "Xian Mo Dragon King doesn't know you, so he won't believe us. How can he let us in? If Xian Mo Dragon King doesn't take us into the city, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do to help the water-kind people get through this crisis. If we're left here all the time, I'm afraid we can only leave, and there's nothing we can do to help the water-kind people." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. "Believe me, that won't happen. Even if Xian Mo Dragon King doesn't take us into the city, I have a communication jade slip here to contact Tai. As long as Tai gives the order, Xian Mo Dragon King, the city master of the origin city, will definitely listen to me." Yun Yao felt relieved and didn't say anything more. Time passed quietly, and soon, half an hour had passed. Right at this moment, a burst of noise suddenly burst out on the road that connected to the city gate. The water-kind people who crowded on the road were driven away by 2 groups of armored and sword-carrying guards, and immediately dispersed. The road made of black stones was emptied out, and hundreds of guards stood on both sides of the road with respectful looks. Under the gaze of countless water-kind people, several imposing figures quickly walked through the black stone road and arrived at the tall city gate. There were 4 figures in total, and 3 of them were at the soul refining stage. The weakest middle-aged man was at the 7th level of the Sky Origin stage. The leader walking in the front was a tall and sturdy young man in a purple robe. His face was stern, and there was a golden dragon horn protruding from his forehead. His skin was also covered with golden dragon scales. Without a doubt, he was the prince of the imperial court, Golden Dragon Tai. The middle-aged man following behind Tai was also tall and sturdy, and his steps were like the wind. His skin was dark, and his eyes were like lightning. His whole body was emitting a noble and domineering aura unique to the dragon race. He was the leader of the imperial court's guards, Black Dragon Long Yuan. The third middle-aged man was also a black dragon. He wore a black robe and a dark golden cloak. He was the master of Xian Moc region, Xian Mo Dragon King. As for the fourth person, he was an ordinary water-kind man, who was at the 7th level of the Sky Origin stage. He was the city master of the Origin City. When Tai arrived at the city gate with Long Yuan, Xian Mo Dragon King, and the city master of the Origin City, all the guards and people near the city gate all knelt down and saluted respectfully. Tai ignored the guards and people around him, and his eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing, who was outside the city's great defensive formation. When he saw that the person was indeed Ji Tianqing, his originally cold and stern expression became much warmer. He actually revealed a faint smile and cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing, saying, "Brother Tianqing, just now, someone reported that you've come to Origin City." This sovereign still didn't dare to believe it. "I didn't expect you to come to Origin City. We meet again." Hearing Tai's words, Xian Mo Dragon King, the city master of the Origin City, and the guard captain's expressions all changed. They looked at Ji Tianqing in shock. They didn't dare to believe that this human youth not only knew Prince Tai, but also had such a close relationship with him. The noble Prince Tai actually called this person brother. His attitude was very warm. Just an hour ago, the guard captain's attitude was firm and refused to let this person into Origin City. Even an idiot knew that they would not have a good ending after insulting and offending Prince Tai's friend. Thinking of this, the guard captain and the dozen or so guards suddenly turned pale. Their eyes were filled with deep fear. Chapter 1249. Seeing the guards at the city gate kneeling down, the surrounding water tribe people immediately burst into a noisy discussion. Tai also stopped smiling and bowed to Ji Tianqing with a sincere expression, apologizing. "Brother Tianqing, these guards are weak and ignorant. They didn't know that a heaven's chosen like you had arrived, and offended you just now. I apologize to you on their behalf. Please be magnanimous and don't let this matter affect your mood." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Tai, you know that I won't lower myself to the same level as these shrimp soldiers, so you don't have to be so courteous. They are just following orders, so you don't have to make it too difficult for them. Let's get down to business. You'd better open the defensive formation quickly. We'll talk after we enter the city." Tai nodded when he saw that Ji Tianqing was so magnanimous. He turned to look at City Lord Yuan beside him. With a fierce look in his eyes, he shouted with a dignified tone, "City Lord Yuan, these guards have offended my good brother, and they deserve to be beheaded. However, this is a special time. Since young Master Ji has pleaded for them, I'll give them a lighter punishment. Break their arms and legs, and lock them in the prison. They can only be released after 3 months." City Lord Yuan bowed with a heart full of fear, then immediately sent someone to carry out the order. Not only did the guards not resist, but they also knelt on the ground as if relieved of a heavy burden, thanking Tai for sparing their lives. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao finally understood how strict the rules of the Water Clan were. Then, Black Ink Dragon King waved his hand and unleashed a dazzling golden light, activating the defensive formation. A light door opened on the 5-colored light barrier, and the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao through the light door, entering Origin City. Countless people and guards on both sides of the road immediately bowed respectfully, welcoming Ji Tianqing into the city. Tai guessed Ji Tianqing's intention, and without wasting any time, he quickly led him into the city and rushed to the city lord's mansion. The city lord's mansion of Origin City was located in the center of the city. It was a huge palace built with brown rocks. The style of the cities and buildings of the Water Clan were different from those of the Human Clan and the Monster Clan. They were very special and ancient. Everyone entered the meeting hall. Tai Yi, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao took their seats. Black Ink Dragon King, City Lord Yuan, and a few Water Tribe generals were all standing respectfully in the main hall. After everyone exchanged greetings and bowed, Tai Yi got down to business and asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, why did you suddenly come to the Eastern Sea and even come to Origin City?" Ji Tianqing explained, "Several months ago, we left the central continent and prepared to head to the Eastern Sea's sinkhole to settle a matter. As they passed by the Eastern Sea, they happened to encounter the demon race's rebellion. They spread a highly toxic plague in the coastal cities, causing a world-shaking disaster. Tens of millions of people were affected, and millions were slaughtered. I helped Divine General Dong Lin uncover the source of the disaster and quelled the poisonous plague before rushing to the Eastern Sea. When I passed through the Xianmo area, I saw that the sea was highly toxic, and billions of fish and people of the Water Clan died. I guessed that the Demon Clan was causing trouble. After discovering this situation, I planned to help. After all, I know a way to solve the disaster. Coincidentally, I met 4 commanders of the Searching Dragon Guards, so I brought them to Origin City." After listening to his explanation, Tai Yi came to a realization. He was originally filled with worry and anxiety, but when he learned that Ji Tianqing could solve the disaster, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. His eyes were surging with joy. "When I learned that a mysterious poison appeared in the Xianmo area, causing the deaths of countless people, I hurried to deal with this matter. It has been 5 days, I have thought of all kinds of methods, but I am helpless." "Tianqing, you actually know a way to solve the source of the disaster. That's great, you came at the right time. This time, you must help me. As long as you can solve this disaster, I and the Imperial Court of the Water Clan will forever remember your kindness." Black Ink Dragon King felt that it was inconceivable. He looked at Ji Tianqing in shock. "Young Master Ji, that mysterious poison is all-pervasive and extremely toxic. His Highness Tai Yi and I have tried all kinds of methods, but we still couldn't find any useful clues. What method do you have to solve it?" The status of Origin City Lord was low, so he couldn't interrupt at this time. But the stone hanging in his heart was lifted. He looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of surprise and excitement, as if he had seen his savior. Ji Tianqing took a deep look at Tai Yi and said in a low voice, "Tai Yi, I believe you also know that the Demon Emperor used an ancient evil method to refine a large number of blood gods. Those blood gods carried the power of disaster and were spreading plagues on the battlefields of various races, causing a terrible disaster. Not only that, the Demon Emperor also sent a large number of elite demon kings to escort the blood gods into the territories of various races, using the disaster to massacre the people. The disaster in the Xianmo area was caused by the blood gods and the demon race." Tai Yi nodded and said with a solemn expression, "That's right, as early as 2 months ago, the frontier battlefield sent back this news. I checked the situation in the Xianmo area, and it was exactly as you said. It was done by the demon race and the blood gods. However, no one expected that the blood gods would sneak into the hinterland of the East Sea and cause a disaster in our territory. The Xianmo area has been corroded by a strong poison. At present, more than 50 million people have died, and more than 200 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Moreover, I have investigated and found that the source of the disaster is the mysterious black water. Unfortunately, the black water is spreading very fast in the sea. I can neither stop it nor find a way to deal with it. During this time, the pharmacists of the Imperial Court have been working like crazy, but they still can't make an effective antidote. Now that the poison has spread to the Long Wind area, if we don't find a way to stop it, the disaster will spread further. At that time, more than 100 million people will die because of it. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said in a low voice, "These are all minor details. If we want to resolve this disaster, the most direct and effective way is to find the blood gods and kill them." Xian Mo Dragon King shook his head and sighed helplessly. "Young Master Ji, you are right. We also understand this point. However, we have never seen the blood gods, and we don't know their characteristics and flaws. How can we find them?" Tai Yi also had the same idea. He nodded with a solemn expression and said, "Yes, this is the biggest problem we are facing." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said in a serious tone, "Tai Yi, I probably know how to find the blood gods, but you have to cooperate with me to resolve this disaster as soon as possible." Tai Yi suddenly became spirited. He nodded without hesitation and said, "Okay. Tianqing, as long as you can help me find the blood gods, I will listen to your orders. For every hour we delay, the black water will spread thousands of miles and kill hundreds of thousands of people. There is no time to lose. Tianqing, you have to think of a way now." Chapter 1250. Although Tai Yi didn't know what Ji Tianqing was going to do exactly, he immediately ordered Castellan Yuan to do as Ji Tianqing asked. In just a few minutes, Castellan Yuan prepared a secret room and a detailed map of the Longwind Sea for Ji Tianqing. The secret room was under the Castellan's mansion. It was not only hidden but also very safe. Ji Tianqing only brought Yun Yao, Tai Yi, and Long Yuan into the secret room. Black Ink Dragon King and Castellan Yuan could only wait outside and wait for orders. After entering the secret room, Ji Tianqing unrolled the map and spread it on the wide stone table. He stared at the map carefully and pondered with a serious expression. The secret room was very quiet. Tai Yi, Yun Yao, and Long Yuan didn't make a sound for fear of disturbing Ji Tianqing. A moment later, Ji Tianqing finished looking at the map of the entire Longwind Sea and looked up at Tai Yi beside him. He said with a serious expression, "Tai Yi, after the poison disaster broke out in the Black Ink Sea, how many people were successfully evacuated?" Tai Yi answered honestly, "More than 50 million people died, and more than 200 million people were affected. However, less than 80 million people successfully escaped to the Longwind Sea. There was no doubt that more than 100 million people of the Water Clan were scattered to other places. It was unknown whether these people had escaped from the Black Ink Sea or if they were still alive." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked with a serious expression, "Then where did you settle those people?" Tai Yi said in a low voice, "There were too many people who suffered. I divided them into two groups and settled them in the Green Tooth Trench and the Long Mountain Grand Canyon. The Green Tooth Trench is 30,000 miles away from here. It's a huge trench that is 100,000 miles long. No people have ever lived there. The Long Mountain Grand Canyon is a little further, 80,000 miles away. It's also a huge canyon that is tens of thousands of miles long. It's like an abyss that can accommodate tens of millions of people. There are no cities in these two areas. It's always been a paradise for water demons and fish. I settled the people there and sent a large number of experts and searching dragon guards to protect them." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Those experts and searching dragon guards are far from enough. Send Black Ink Dragon King and Long Yuan to guard these two places immediately." Tai Yi was startled and immediately frowned as if he had guessed something. He frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Tianqing, do you suspect that the experts of the Demon Clan and Blood God will sneak into those two camps to cause trouble?" "Of course." Ji Tianqing looked at him seriously and said with an unquestionable tone, "When I was searching for the Blood God in the 100 cities of the East Sea, the Blood God and the Demon Clan had been keeping an eye on the refugee camps. They had been wantonly spreading poisons and plagues that could kill millions of people at once. There were tens of millions of water to kill blood to kill demon s. This T est s was to cause kill. Most importantly, Blood God created all kinds of disasters and killed tens of millions of people in order to absorb their blood and souls to increase his strength. In the Black Ink Sea, more than 50 million water tribe people have died. I estimate that Blood God's strength has reached the soul refining realm. Tai's face turned gloomy and his heart was heavy. If Blood God's strength has reached the soul refining realm, won't we not be able to resist the poisonous black water? Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a serious tone, soul refining realm experts will die if they are poisoned by the black water. Tai did not hesitate and immediately gave the order. He said in a dignified tone, Long Yuan, I order you to rush to the Long Mountain Grand Canyon immediately. Take over the authority and lead 100,000 soldiers. Protect the people no matter what. Long Yuan immediately bowed and obeyed. When he turned and left the secret room and rushed to the Long Mountain Canyon, Tai gave another order to Black Ink Dragon King outside the secret room. Black Ink Dragon King obeyed and left Origin City as fast as he could, rushing to the Black Ink Sea Trench. Soon, the secret room was quiet again. Tai hesitated for a moment, looking as if he wanted to say something. Ji Tianqing saw that and asked, Tai, if you have any questions, just ask. Tai did not hesitate and quickly asked, Tianqing, the black dragon you rode in Origin City, was it the little black dragon from before? Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, what's wrong? Is there a problem? Tai's eyes flashed and he said in a strange tone, don't you think it's strange that the black dragon has changed so much? Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. It's a little strange, but it had a fortuitous encounter and recently reached the soul refining realm. It's natural for it to change like that, isn't it? No, no, no. Tai quickly waved his hand and explained with a serious expression, Tianqing, you don't know the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan and think that it's normal. In fact, none of the black dragons under the imperial court would look like that after reaching the soul refining realm. Its current appearance is not that of the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan. Ji Tianqing was startled and frowned in confusion. Not the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan. Then what kind of clan is it? Tai took a deep breath and his eyes flashed. He said in a serious tone, Black Dragon. Divine Black Dragon. Divine Beast Black Dragon. Ji Tianqing narrowed his eyes as a glint flashed across his eyes. He was quite shocked. He knew that the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan were all scale dragons, and there was a huge difference between scale dragons and the legendary divine dragons. In ancient times, there was a legend that a snake would live for 100 years to become a snake, 1,000 years to become a scale dragon, and 10,000 years to become a dragon. The legendary dragons were the true divine dragons of the 9 heavens. The dragons of the Eastern Sea Imperial Court were scale dragons. In the past 10,000 years, no one in the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan had been able to cultivate into a true dragon. Now, Tai was telling him that the little black dragon had revealed its true talent after reaching the soul refining realm. It was not an ordinary scale dragon, but a divine black dragon. This news filled Ji Tianqing's heart with shock and joy. Yun Yao also found it unbelievable and was happy and excited. She quickly asked Tai, in the entire Tianxian continent's 10,000 years of history, there has never been a true divine dragon. In the ancient legends, the divine dragon's talent and power are unparalleled in the world, and no other clan can match it. Is this true? Tai nodded solemnly and said, of course it's true. The ancients used dragons and phoenixes to describe the most outstanding geniuses, and dragons are ranked before phoenixes. The divine dragon is not only the most perfect and powerful clan, but also the most honorable clan. Tianqing, the black dragon has only reached the soul refining realm, 2 levels lower than you. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.